All right, hello and welcome everybody back to the Game Dev Show. Today we're going to be talking about football and big sporting events, sale deals, which there are quite a few pretty cool ones. You can check that out right now if you want, see what's coming up, and a couple other interesting game dev topics. Maybe a little bit about the new big purchase that just happened. And I also want to ask Andrew some questions about asset publishing. If you've got questions for us, make sure to just drop them in the chat and we'll get to those probably halfway through the stream. So welcome guys, thanks for coming out, and happy Sunday that's not Super Bowl Sunday.
Yeah, you want to explain a little bit more on that?
Yeah, so for everybody watching, I sent out an email that today was the Super Bowl. I totally lost a week myself. Got mixed up, and I got kind of excited about it because I was thinking about the Super Bowl, and I was thinking about talking to Dave, and I was thinking about talking to Dave about Super Bowl stuff because he's worked on stuff for the Super Bowl that was game dev related, and I thought it'd be really interesting. And then I totally forgot what week it was and just sent out the email anyway. So I think we're still going to talk about that a bit today, though, right, Dave?
Yeah. Why not do it before the Super Bowl? Because everybody else is going to be watching it this week.
Yeah, give them an opportunity to know what to look out for and see where they can find some game engine stuff actually being used at big sporting events. I see it all the time, like when I go out to places now, go to theme parks, even restaurants, like on the little devices. I see, I'm like, oh, this is made in Unity. I'm like, yeah, this is definitely a Unity app. Like, and see it all the time. I'm like, oh, I recognize these things, and I see how the code. I know how this code is done and how this thing's built. So it's really cool to see. And I think at the Super Bowl is even cooler because that's just like a giant event that regular people know about too.
Yeah.
So I guess before we dive into things, if you're actually no, let's just dive into your videos, Dave. Why don't we do that? So you've got a new video coming out this week, right?
Yep. It's the last in season. I'm going to call it seasons now. So season 1 of the tutorials I've done, so that people don't bug me about building them when I'm not doing them. But yeah, the last video in that series is coming out today, which is preprocessor directives. And that will be coming out telling people about, when to use Unity editor preprocessor directive and all the other wonderful Unity preprocessor directives that are there, and also about using them for your own libraries. Let's say you have a series of libraries that you use between projects. You can actually use preprocessor directories on one library to say whether the other library is there. Because let's say you have a weapons library, and then you have an XR interaction library because you're doing stuff in VR. Then you might have it where you're actually going to use the XR interaction library, but not use the weapons library in a project. So you could put a preprocessor directive in the weapons library that says use weapons, and that gets put into Unity. And then when you load up the XR interaction, only the code that hasn't got that preprocessor directive will be used because that you're not using that particular weapons library. So it's things like that will be into this particular video and talking about that. And also how to set up preprocessor directives so that as soon as you drop a library set of code into your project, it actually sets that preprocessor directive for you without you having to mess around. So you don't have to remember to do it in every project you do. Now, this is more important for people that do lots of projects. Like I have a ton of prototyping projects on the go all the time for different companies, for my own companies. So I have a lot of these libraries being chopped and changed in between each one. So I use them quite extensively throughout.
Nice. Yeah, I remember I used to use them a lot in the past with really big projects, and I found that now majority of the preprocessor stuff that I use is just using the built-in ones to do special stuff based on what they're doing, or some other library or asset that I've pulled in. But I find that I rarely end up needing to do them on my own because I'm not working on a lot of projects that are working together, or with projects that have just large amounts of people that are making changes and swapping things in and out. But it's super useful skill, and I think it's something that people don't, because if they're not in that situation, they don't run into it and realize that it's something that they can use. Just really handy and really important, especially with the editor ones. That's I think the number one. If you've got to know that one. If you haven't used that before, watch the video just for that.
Yeah, people are using it without realizing that's what it is. That's what a preprocessor directive is, and they can use it in other places. Like a lot of the Unity tutorials that you download, if they've got any preprocessor directives in them at all, It's the Unity editor saying, okay, this is my main code and I'm doing some gizmo stuff here and I've chucked a handle in there and oh no, I put using the Unity editor. And now when I go to build, my build crashes and it doesn't allow me to build because it's saying you've included the Unity editor library in one of your classes. Why are you doing this? Well, you can actually just use a preprocessor directive, #if Unity _ editor, and then put using Unity editor library, and then #endif, and that wraps that up, and then wrap up whatever you're using the Unity editor section in your particular class for. And then you can basically create classes and have both going at the same time. For instance, I have a library that I use called a node controller, which is your basic state machine sort of system. And I use it for AI and I use it for game flow. And I have classes that are very much game related, but they have loads of editor elements in them. And I have used these preprocessor directives to wrap those up so that they don't go out when I do the final builds.
That's a mistake I make, unfortunately, way too often with my editor extensions, where I will forget to add them. Like the built-in ones I understand pretty well, and I will forget to add them, and then somebody will go to build the demo scene and they'll be like, hey, it's not working, how come? And a lot of people, like I was not too long ago, had no idea about them. So it's an error, it can't build, what's wrong? And it's just adding that to those lines that are showing up in the console. But since I need to do a better job of reminding myself to test a build before I release a new update, just because I tend to include Unity Engine stuff or editor stuff too often without thinking about it. And then, when I started the game modules bundle a year ago or so, originally the plan was that each module would be a standalone package that would do its own little thing. But if you had them all together, they could do even more. And so I was going down what kind of was a rabbit hole of preprocessor directives, adding my own, and then using them. So if you had this one with this, now all this new code was here, all this new inspector GUI was there, and all this other stuff. And then if you had all three, then even more happened. And then quickly I was like, this is getting chaotic. And so I scrapped that idea, and now there's just one package that comes with everything. And it's just so much easier. It was a grand plan, and it would have been awesome, but no, it was too much mental gymnastics.
Yeah, I mean, one of the ones I picking out a particular one outside of Unity Editor. I worked building an indie games company a while ago called Hutch Games, and we built a lot of games. And this had millions of users of the games themselves, so it had to be super strong every time it went out, and it should do anyway when you release a game. But we actually started spanning Unity editor versions, and we still had to look after our previous versions. Now, because we made a lot of car games each time, you basically build a library and then you can share that library between the car games. And I've done this for things like VixC, which was the Superbowl stuff we'll talk about in a minute, and other big companies that basically had projects on previous Unity versions. Now, you might find a bug later on and go, I have to fix that. Now, you're not on that game anymore, and you've upgraded your Unity version, but your library can actually go back and you can say using Unity editor so-and-so, or using Unity, and put in the version number. So you can actually have Unity version numbers of code. So if you're running this particular version of Unity, it runs this code. If you're running the newer version of Unity, it runs this code. And those preprocessor directives give you the opportunity to still keep libraries going for previous projects, even when you've upgraded to newer projects that might have obsolete code in Unity, like obsolete library calls, or they've got new calls in Unity that don't exist in previous versions of Unity. So that sort of thing comes into play as well, though.
I just realized we had some people watching on Twitch. I decided to stream to both YouTube and Twitch today. Saw some comments in there and really confused me for a second.
Oh, yeah.
Awesome, though. I think there's lots of people into game development on Twitch, so hopefully it takes off there.
Yeah, well, they have the relatively new category now for game development.
I need to make sure that I actually tagged everything as the correct category so that it actually shows up for the right people in there. It's been a while. So you want to talk a little bit about events, Dave, and just like things like the big title that we've got here for the Super Bowl, and just
The Super Bowl.
using Unity and just game engines at these big, because I mean Super Bowl is one of them, but I know you've done lots of different types of big events, and I know lots of people who've done concerts and theme parks and all kinds of crazy stuff with game engines. But I think yours is probably the most interesting. You're over there because
You're kind.
it's the Super Bowl and it's very timely because the game's coming next week again, not this week. 1 week off on my calendar. But you want to just talk a little bit about what that was and how that came about, how you went from building games to building stuff that was being used at the Super Bowl live in front of however many ridiculous millions of numbers of people. And
Yeah,
had to be
sure.
like live and work and be, because I mean that's got to be a little bit stressful. Like you're building a thing that has to be live in front of the whole world, and if it screws up, like you can't patch it and do it again next week, right? Like you can't fix it on the next update. There's no update. It's done and it has to be perfect. Like, oh, what was that like? You know, just share a little bit.
So I'll give you a bit of an intro to it. I was building video games, obviously, for like 10, 12 years, and was finishing up some indie games in the UK. I came over to America because my wife's American and I now live just south of LA. And while looking for work out here and decided to go back in, I was looking at going back into video game studios. But one thing came up and somebody asked me to go and look at augmented reality. Now, I have a keen interest in immersive experiences anyway, whether that be virtual reality, augmented reality, or mixed reality, or whatever you want to call it. And basically, while I was looking at these various options, somebody came to me and said, look, the Indiana Pacers basketball team are looking for an augmented reality game to be played in the stadium with all the people around the audience watching. How could you do that? And I went through how I would build it and how I would use it. And they ended up accepting it and asking me to come in and contract for them to build this particular application. So I went in there and we built it out, and unfortunately it didn't get released in the end. They made a big video about it, talking about using it and everything, but in the end they decided they didn't want to release it for various NDA things, so I'm not going to go into it. But in doing so, I'd shown to this particular company that contracted me that you could use video game engines outside of video games, and you could use them for different activities, events, etc. They then gave me a call a little bit later on and said, okay, this is really interesting. How could you take this even further? And that's where it basically developed. I went in as a contract CTO for a company to build out a real-time engine, a real-time program on top of Unity that basically could run 24/7 on display and show social media integrations with real-time environments, whether that be a massive stadium, whether that be a character coming out, a mascot coming out and displaying social media posts or activities that were happening during the game. So you can imagine all the things you could do with this. If you're in a big 86,000 stadium like Wembley Stadium, and you're looking up at the giant screen, and you could display a real-time engine on that screen, whether that be Unreal or Unity, and link that with social media that the fans are actually engaging with, then suddenly you have an incredible link to the fans that you can play back and forwards with them, and you can play games with them as they're in the stadium. And that's what we started to develop. I built a prototype to start off with, just myself under the company, just showing that this was actually possible to do. Then I hired in a big team and we started building these things out even further. The NFL took it on even further. And our big break was doing the NFL draft and then doing the Super Bowl. And what that looked like is if you were in the stadium and you were reacting to the thing, whether that be on Twitter, whether that be on Facebook or whatever social media, we would basically bring that stuff in and then show that on the giant board in a panel display or in a 3D stadium display with the mascot, or with just flying boards with your pictures on it showing you enjoying the thing. And then we would bring up text that said, Sharon really enjoyed the game or whatever, craziness that would go on, and try and make sure that we removed all the ridiculous pictures you get that you don't want to display in front of 86,000 people live in a stadium. And if the camera's watching 100 million people outside of that, and names
you have
as well.
to have people like live watching for that stuff and cutting out the bad things that people are trying to get by.
We didn't allow AI or anything. We didn't allow any of that sort of thing to call that stuff. We had several people sitting in a booth out in the stadium that would basically monitor what was coming through and saying, okay, that's a picture that's not allowed on the stadium. Okay, that username is never going to be shown at all. And they would basically do your sort of Tinder thing. Yes, no, yes, no, yes, yes, no, no, and go through it and get those up on the stadium. And you were trying to get as much content.
Then? Or they had to be approved before they would get on?
No, every single post has to be done because somebody will get whitelisted and then their team will start losing.
For the post. You're whitelisting the post.
Yeah, you whitelist them and then they go into a queue. Yeah. And then you can pick certain ones to be displayed as featured, like crazy good, amazing sort of post that somebody's put up there, or famous people. You can put them up because a lot of famous people obviously are tweeting, twittering, displaying that stuff up there. Now, all of this again it was done with Unity originally. Some of the stuff is now done with Unreal. I'm not with the company anymore. I left a little while ago because I'm a contractor that just goes in and builds companies for people. And it was a fascinating affair. Being at the stadium, watching your stuff come up with a massive crowd around you, and you're on the sideline, and you've got a photographer with you, and you're pointing out, like, take pictures of that because we need that to go up on the big screens. It's great, and then you integrate that with what they call the ticker tapes, which are the bands that go around the stadium ring. So you see the bands that just come through. Integrating those into it. You're out in the foyer waiting to go into the stadium. There's tons of screens. There's tons of experiences out there. You integrate everything into those. As that progressed, we done more augmented reality stuff. So outside of the Super Bowl and the NFL draft, I mean, the NFL draft is a much actually more integrated experience than the Super Bowl. The Super Bowl is very much scripted. You don't get an awful lot of time as far as a display company to put stuff up because a lot of it is showing gameplay or advertisements. We would, in the draft, have more integration because it's a day affair. People are turning up. There's big stands everywhere. There's interactive panels all over the place. So we would take care of all of those activities. Now, outside of the NFL, we've done this for baseball, basketball, hockey, soccer, you name it, soccer, football for my English fans. I'm going to get killed when I go back to England and everybody's like, why do you keep calling it soccer? So we done it for all the sports teams. But then outside of that, we started to look at music events because obviously an event's an event, but you can do even more things at music events that you might not do with sporting events. You have more people coming on stage. You can integrate a schedule into the event because there's not one big event happening. You've got lots of stages going on. So we've done Austin City Limits, Lollapalooza. I'm going to forget half of the ones because I'm not a big fan of any of these sort of events myself. It's funny, I was the CTO for that company for probably 3 or 4 years, maybe 5 even, and I don't do sport and I don't do music. So, well, I listen to music obviously, but I don't go to any sort of events like that. So it was a bit weird. And I've got funny stories of me and the CEO standing in a room and these people coming up and shaking our hand, and we're like, "Oh, hi, how you doing?" And they're like, "Yeah, we're good." And then they go on, and my assistant next to me is absolutely wetting herself. And I'm like, "What's up?" She's like, "Oh my God, that was so-and-so and so-and-so." And we're like, "We don't know who the hell that is."
It happens when you get old.
Well, yeah, even more so now. It's like, I don't yeah. My nieces and nephews point people out and I'm like, I haven't got a clue who that is. My wife points things out and calls me old. Now, with the events, like the music events and things like the rodeo out in Texas and stuff like that, that has a different sort of feel. What we've done is we actually designed a 3-story, 4-sided tower for this thing. So it's a big old tower that sits in the middle of these events. And we've done multiple
LED tower?
Yeah, basically. Wow. Big screens up each side of them. And what would happen is when people walked up to it, we would have 4 panels that we could run. Now, we still run this off of Unity. And what you can do in Unity is you can actually, on the cameras, you can select which display to go out to. Well, you used to be able to. I'm pretty sure you still can do that. And what we could do is we could actually have things go across multiple displays. So even though it looked like each one was running separately on a separate engine, actually it was one engine running all the 4 displays doing different things. And then we would have things integrate over them. Yeah, this is an example of one of the events. That's Lollapalooza, because their art is weird. I'm not going to say awful. I'm going to say weird. Now, the 4 displays would be an interactive map on one side, a schedule on another side that would be constantly changing and taking feedback. Another side would actually be social media. So again, like the football and the baseball and all the rest, we would have stuff that came up and said, this is so-and-so, and they think so-and-so is happening, and they're really enjoying the Foo Fighters on stage or whatever. And then the other side was an interesting one. It was actually what we called a funhouse mirror. And what you could do is we actually had a camera integrated into the actual big tower. And as you walked up, it would film you and then augment you into this little kind of world up above. And obviously you can imagine people get drunk at these events and they start having super fun in front of these big giant screens. And it as you see, there are UFOs coming over and dropping something on somebody's head. At other events, we'd have like birds land on them. Voodoo Fest is one we did, which is awesome because obviously that's got a real Halloween style vibe with skeletons and all the rest into it. So you could do even more things onto there. And again, all running through Unity. You take some sort of leagues from Snapchat and the filters they put on that. That's the sort of thing you can do on there. The other things we did was, you think of the Kiss Cam. And this was just as I was finishing with the company, I prototyped something for a Kiss Cam that basically would enable them to take a big picture of a load of people and then augment things over them. So you don't just have the usual crappy logo above them with the little hearts or whatever. You integrate loads of stuff. Suddenly they're all got badger heads on or something like that. And you could do that because we were using augmented reality, and we could work out how many people were in the stand and how many faces were over them. Now, things to point out about using game engines with this sort of thing, because you're providing the hardware, you're not limited. So even though you can optimize, and you do optimize as much as possible, because this thing's got to be running a lot, and there's ways of garbage collecting and stuff to make sure that this thing can keep running without loads of hesitations. One of the things to look at when you're building for these giant stadiums is the fact that you don't have to limit yourself with the hardware you're running. So we had $6,000, $10,000 machines running these particular things. So we had tons of RAM sitting on there, tons of hard drive space, great CPUs, GPUs and SLI and all the rest of it. So we could do things that you couldn't do normally. So when you think about building a video game, this can be ray traced. It can be just gorgeous looking, loads of post-processing, loads of augmented reality and processing over the top of them, because you don't have to be limited by your hardware as such, because these events are big, they pay a lot of money, and you can do a load of stuff with that. So yeah, it's a great activity. Beyond that, we did stuff for Madison Square Garden, where we actually created games that people could play. So they would turn up, and it was projected onto the side of the actual Madison Square Garden complex, and it would play a game. People would turn up, it'd say, right, if you want to play, do this, like you do with the giving away the rider licenses. If you want to play, tweet this to this and at us at this. And then they would do that. And then it would select a certain few people in the audience and would say, okay, here we go. And then they would actually have a race. And that was either pre-programmed or determined, or would basically change up partway through. And there would be loads of fun events happening. So in one of them, we'd done it where somebody actually jumped on the big golden bull that you see outside the stock exchange, and they were riding that through a crowd. And this was all their pictures, their profile pictures, put onto banners that were then like creatures that would actually be in the arena, and they would play out, and somebody would win, and they'd win a massive prize, because these are giant events that can afford to put out crazy prizes at the end of it. You can take it even further. We did an event for basketball. And if everybody's ever watched some of the basketball arena shots where they basically projection map onto the court, and then they have the court fall away and come back, we were actually building them at the company for the NBA as it was. And then we looked at integrating games into this. Now, obviously, there's a perspective trick with this, so not all the stand sees a great picture on the floor, because it's all about where your perspective is. So the camera gets most of it. And we basically built out games that you could play. And we had people come down onto the floor, and they would have controllers or something. They'd be answering questions, or they'd have to run to a certain part of the floor, and that would then trigger something else. So they'd be eliminated, or they'd continue, and the projection map would play accordingly as they were doing that. Take it even further, the recent Superbowl, where they done all the anniversary that came up recently, and they had the massive augmented reality playing, or the panther that jumped across the stadium that you would see recently at another game. This is the team I built there, a fantastic group. And they're now building augmented reality at stadium level augmented reality, where they basically play out giant scenes for the camera and the people at home, but also the big screen is there, so people that are in the stadium can see the big bird flying in for the Hawks. So it just shows, and I think the biggest point out of this is the fact that game engines aren't just for games. You can do it for these huge events. We also do things like, I built for one company, I built a virtual reality real estate program that enabled people to show their houses with real estate agents across the globe. So you could basically go in, use 360 camera pictures all around. We had a really cool little application that enabled you to link those pictures up and say, that's a doorway, that's the entrance to that. And then when somebody went into the world, they would have little markers that would come up beautifully in the world, and they'd press on that and they could move through the house and see that in a virtual reality headset. Again, using the Unity game engine, fantastic piece of kit. It's a company called Transported VR. It's a bit old now, same as a lot of the stuff you're seeing here. But again, it's using a game engine as a different business model outside of that.
I got two questions for you on that. Well, first was one, just like it's a comment that it is really cool that like you can take the game dev skills and kind of apply them to, I think, just about any industry. Like almost anything that you want to get into, there's probably some way to use a game engine in there. Even like, especially things like, think of medical stuff, sports, entertainment, really like anything that has a lot of human interaction, where you can make things that are interactive and easier to use, which is really cool. But I was curious on your thoughts on making these application type things or these experiences versus making games. Like what's easier, what's more difficult, what pays better, what's the I guess just what's the general difference, like between making games and making these applications? Is it easy to just switch back and forth? Is it difficult? Is one much easier, much harder? Is it what are your thoughts there on just the comparison?
The only real difference between them, I mean, the pay is pretty much the same across the board, because they've got to be competitive with the games industry to bring people in. You see a lot of this stuff being used currently in films. Mandalorian, for instance, that TV series uses the Unreal Engine to build out massive LED displays. And that technology, XR space, is really growing. It's a massive business, and if you're looking for a job in the industry, don't just look at video games, look at that. And they're gaming, and it's building proper games. You know, they're amazing bits of kit that they're building out. You're not going to lose anything in there. Now, as far as the tech and everything's concerned, the real difference between this is your end user. Who are you doing this for? Who's going to be benefiting? Now, with games, you're building for people out there to play your video games. With these, you're building for both a client and an end user behind the client. So the client has to be super happy with the display you're putting on or the tech you've built or designed for them. But it has to then prove itself in the world with people using it. So let's take a different example. I do a lot of stuff at the moment with VR training, where I concept and design VR training programs for big manufacturing companies, for medical companies, etc. These things here, you're providing it for a user that might be a doctor. So I recently concepted something for a doctor that was basically, and again, NDA, so I can't go into too much, but they're performing operations in a high-risk environment. And when we were looking at that particular application, the doctor is going to feed me loads of information on how this thing happens. And then I have to watch horrendous videos on them actually using this stuff in the world. And I'm not great with those sort of things, but I once had to watch somebody drilling into somebody's kneecap over and over and over and over again to learn all the intricacies on how that worked. But you build that for the client, and the client would use it, but it's a training program. So you have to install to the client that, yes, they will be able to use it really quickly, but all these little things, that tutorials around, one, how to use VR in general, but two, how to actually operate and integrate and interact in the world with your controllers or your hands, if you're using that particular system. You have to teach them that that is integral to their end user. Their end user won't know how to perform the operation. So you're both becoming a teacher and you're selling to the client at the same time as you're doing that. With something like a stadium level experience, you got to think people don't have controllers. Like, they're tweeting to the thing itself. So again, you have to think about the user flow, how they're going to interact with your experience. The funhouse mirror, somebody walks up, oh, they're in a group. Oh, they've all got their arms around each other. Oh, they're wearing funny glasses. Suddenly you're thinking to yourself, okay, what's the end user going to be on this? And how do we make sure that that is fun for that user to play? So it takes it out of, I've got a video game. It's in a closed environment, being a console, or it's in a slightly more open environment, being a PC mobile experience. It's optimized for that. It's running for that. And I'm playing with those gamers to make sure that they've got, they know what they're doing and they can play well and they can have fun. And I've got a good game loop in there that's going to keep them coming back. This is a similar sort of thing, but it's an end user that can't control the experience itself. You have to keep it fun for them. So it treads the line between, say, a TV show and a game. The game is very interactive. You've got to keep that interaction going to keep the user playing. It's got a beautiful story in it. This is purely story, how they interacting with it to build a story that keeps them in the game itself. So yeah, it's game engines. Not a lot's different between writing an augmented reality thing for a massive tower to an augmented reality thing on your mobile phone. Yeah, the screen space is a bit bigger, and obviously you have to have people design the tower and how it gets displayed, etc. But the actual experience itself, you're just thinking about the user story and the user loop.
I hadn't thought about it that way. Go ahead, Andrew.
There was a augmented reality app way early, like 3 years ago, 4 years ago, when Apple first started, making that thing on the iPad, and it was, you could put characters. I think it was the maybe the Sketchfab viewer, actually, where you could put any Sketchfab thing into the world, and it was really cool. But if somebody walked in front or behind it, it would be in front of it, or the projection was always in front of whatever. There was no depth. And a couple weeks ago at my buddy's house, I saw that they were doing the same type of thing, but now the depth was there. So you could walk behind and in front of the 3D thing. And it got me thinking, especially with everything you're talking about here. I mean, I can imagine a future where everything, everywhere you go, all these screens are being driven by game engines, whether it's Unity, Unreal, or whatever. Not Lumberyard, perhaps. And then you
Did
go
you see the poll?
What's that? Oh, I
see my poll.
I see the results.
Yeah. I get it. The poll is like 1% Lumberyard on the votes. I put up a poll. What engine would you use if you didn't use Unity? And yeah, Lumberyard was the first choice, and by far the worst. Most of the comments were like, "I didn't realize it still existed." Sorry to interject, Andrew.
No, that's fine.
That made me laugh when you brought that up.
So it makes me think, like, hey, when you go to the store and, like, Nordstrom or Nordstrom Rack, for those of us who don't go to Nordstrom, you put on a jacket to try it on in the mirror, right? Nothing's stopping that mirror from then working with you, and interacting with you. So you're trying on a jacket and it's saying, change the color, try this on, try this hat on at the same time, and trying to sell you stuff. And then it'll tell you where you can find that thing in the store if you want,
Yeah, so I'd done some stuff with iBeacons a while ago for a concept for somebody, and then we actually published thing out in Las Vegas. I was hired to concept an iBeacon search where you could actually go around, you'd search around the casino to find things with a mobile app, and that was super fun. But that sort of thing integrated into stores is also what you're talking about there. You try things on, it's really good. It's like, where is this? Well, you can use iBeacons to tell you where it is in the store, and as you're approaching it, and do all the rest, and even tell the user, okay, you're near this would look really good on you, and that integration. And you can use iBeacons in Unity. I developed an app that basically did that. That enabled you to use these iBeacons to find out where somebody was, and then tell them, great, you're near this particular thing, you should do this, or you should have this.
That's really interesting.
Great use.
Yeah. It can get creepy. Suddenly I'm imagining, like, if you have the right app on your phone, all the employees know who you are and will come up to you and be like, hey, Andrew, I just noticed you were looking at that gray jacket. Have you checked out this? I'm like, whoa, what? So it could be creepy maybe, but yeah. It's
super creepy. And obviously there's privacy concerns and all the rest of it with that sort of thing. You're walking down the line at Walmart and it says, oh, I noticed your hemorrhoids have probably been playing up again. Would you like hemorrhoid cream? And it's blasting that out, and suddenly you forgot to turn down your sound. Yeah, it's probably not going to be the most awesome thing. Amazon will love it, obviously.
It's like when Target was telling people they were pregnant before they realized it. Their family was finding out through the mail.
Yeah, not the best move by them, that's for sure.
Not intentional.
No.
It's like accidental side effects. You're like, I'm going to make this awesome so we can target people and use
Really
AI, and not realize that you might accidentally inform somebody's parents that they're pregnant before the people even know.
It just leads to more. The thing to take away from this is that, these game engines can be used for a hell of a lot more. And I've made a career now of building these things for other things, like using a robot that's miles away from you. You've got a VR headset on and you're controlling that robot. I did a concept for that a while ago for a company. There's so much you can play with in this. And as the tech is getting smaller and better, you look at hand-holding with augmented reality, where somebody's in a manufacturing environment. They walk up to something and they're like, I don't know how to fix this particular device. They make a phone call on their HoloLens, and the next thing they know, they've got the expert across the country seeing what they're seeing and going, okay, this is what you need to do. Open it up. They open it up, and he's like drawing on the thing. And the engineer there, she's like, okay, excellent. I can see exactly the wire I need to pull, the thing I need to change, and all the rest, as this expert is showing her how to do this particular thing. That is where pretty much every manufacturing company is jumping into using game engines now and using augmented reality. This ability to do servicing externally. BMW and Porsche did a load of stuff on this previously. And talking of cars, there's now a Unity section for doing car displays and being able to build amazing looking car displays. Because every car now comes with a big ass LED screen in it that you can play with. Tesla started a bit of a revolution as far as that was concerned. Now you look at something like that ridiculous Mercedes that came out that's just a frigging huge dashboard that is just screen, and you're like, great, I can play with this stuff. And that's then integrated into the immersive experience that is the car. The Mercedes one, for instance, links up with the way the air is put through the car system, the underglow lighting within the car environment, what's under your feet, how it glows, the heads-up display that comes up in front of you. Look at the VW ID4 that actually has a light that moves to indicate which direction you should be going when you get to the end. These are all done with engines, and the integration that comes into cars now is something next level. And Unity game engine has the ability to do some of this stuff for it. Some of them are novel displays where you've got a bit out here and then it goes really big and then it goes small again. And it's not just there's a 1920 1080 screen, I'm going to pump this out onto it. How do you adapt to have that flow going through it?
I bet a lot of those are set up as separate screens with just like separate inputs. Right? You would output them in Unity just like you did on that big screen as like just different displays, and then you got to kind of line everything up so that it makes sense when the when it's a weird offset one going down there. I've always thought it'd be interesting to like build an app that runs on a Tesla. I don't have a Tesla to do that on, so I won't be doing it. But if I had one, I would probably struggle to not try to just put something onto it. And it's not one of those things that I will go get one like that. I'll often like go get a device to develop for it just for fun, but I won't go that far as to buy a car just to make an app.
Cheap.
Sponsorship.
Cheap. Put a big ass tablet on the middle of your dash and then just build the stuff for that and integrate it. There's nothing stopping you from integrating into. There's if you ever are in your car, and it's usually in this spot down by your left leg if you're in America, because you're on the left side driving, on the England you're on the right side driving. There's a little port that you can open up that has like 5 connections onto it, and that's actually a service port that they can link up the computer to work out what's going on in your car. I do not advise you play with this unless you're an expert. Obviously, you're running this thing while you're driving is not going to be a good idea if you don't know what you're doing. But you can get back loads of information on what's happening with the car from these ports. Now you link that up to some sort of Bluetooth or Wi-Fi device that you link to a tablet, and now you're integrated into what's the car doing. You know how fast the car is going. You know it's servicing, whether lights are coming up on the dashboard. You can always put lights up on the tablet. You can integrate these things up. And all you need is a 3D printer, a tablet, and a few wires.
That's definitely not going to happen for me. I worry too much that I will add an extra brace and kill myself. One extra curly brace and I'm dead. Right? Like the same reason I wouldn't want to work on airplanes or anything else where if I make a mistake, people are dead. Definitely not my own car.
The guy that taught me C programming way back in the 90s, he actually wrote the air traffic control system for Scotland, one of the original ones. And I remember chatting with him, and he's like, "Yeah, I wrote this, and we did this, and this." I was like, that's super cool. He's like, "Yeah, but I won't fly into Scotland." Why? It's like, okay, thanks for that. Now I'm going to shit myself every time I get on a plane to Scotland.
There. Yeah, I'm with you. I get nervous when I think about the software in there, and I just try to block out. I think like maybe this is old enough that it doesn't have software and it'll be okay.
Yeah, I've seen enough of my stuff crash and got stuck on motion simulators that I forgot to put an emergency stop on and things like that. I'd have somebody look over what I was building at the same
time. So there was a question about a tutorial on multi-displays. I think I've done one. I don't know if you have. I might have to do another one of these.
Yeah, I could do it. It's
interesting one to do.
If you're looking at Unity, we could build one out. If you're looking at Unity, you have on the camera component the display options in there. Now, obviously, that moves around whether you're running URP or HDP or whatever. You've got all the rest of the stuff coming in. But it's definitely in there, and I can't remember exactly what it's called because I haven't got Unity up at the moment. But it's display
target display. In fact, I can screen share and just show it real quick. Why not? Let's just pop it up. I've got this robot that I was taking a peek at right here, and it's this option right here on the camera. You just go out to display 2 or display 3 or whichever one. Update. Can you do more than 8, or is 8 the limit, or is there some way around 8 going past? I've never needed to go more than 4, so I never checked.
The thing you've got to think about also is what your GPU can do. So most GPUs have 5 ports. Well, most of the new ones have 5 ports, but only 4 of them actually can be run at one point. Now, obviously, you can do things like splitting and stuff like that when you go out from it. But if you have multiple GPUs, you can start running with more. If you turn off the SLI capabilities in them, you can run several more displays off of the next one. And then you've got to start thinking about your throughput from your CPU. There's extra steps to think about once you start going into more than 4 displays. But you can do some of this stuff.
Yeah, I would think it'd be a weird scenario where you wanted to do a whole bunch more than that. On a single device, at least, and not just have multiple computers running it and pushing it.
Yeah, I mean, a lot the shows we did, we had a lot of displays going, but a lot of them were duplicates. So you'd basically send out the HDMI display port or whatever. You'd send that out, and then that would actually be split, and then it would be sent through extenders off to various displays around the stadium. So if you're in a foyer and you're entering from foyer A, it would look exactly like foyer B, and that's actually just being sent around. The integration of these major display event locations, the vans and the amount of kit out the back. So most of these stadiums have car parks underneath that you'll never get to see, but they park just trucks, lines of trucks up there that they basically have people sitting in, and all the display lines are coming into those trucks to actually run all these things.
So all the cabling's coming down from there and into the trucks.
It's crazy cool just to walk around and start playing with all that stuff and looking at all of it. Obviously, they didn't let me play with it too much because I didn't have to screw it up just before everything went off. They're like, here are your cables.
That's fair.
And here is a little microphone where we will shout at you when we're going to start displaying your stuff. Because obviously we'd run the ticker tapes and all the rest of it most of the time. But when you want to put social displays up, they'd shout at you down the microphone. Vixie, you're on in 5, and then you'd have to have something lined up. So you're constantly lining things up, and then they would go, right, you're on in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then your display. They basically switch, and then your display that you're outputting goes into where it's going. So you have to have something up at that point. If you don't have something up at that point, they shout at you.
Wow, yeah,
yeah. Sure. I bet. Yeah, they got to keep showing something else.
Something's always got to. Oh, massive operation. I mean, they've always got a live camera that sits, it's sort of a dead camera that just basically looks at the stadium, massively out, focused out, sort of thing that they can always flip back to at any point. Because you have to have something to fall back to. But yeah, obviously there's levels that they go through to get to you on.
Wow. The stress level of being that director, because there's probably like one person who's directing that and is calling those shots. That's got to be a rush.
Yeah, there's one person that's directing the go this, but you have several directors under that. So that director will do the main displays mainly and be talking about the ticker tapes every now and again and things like that. But they have other directors underneath them that are dealing with certain sections of the stadium as well. And looking at what's being displayed on those areas, and then they'll point to these people and ask them to flip over. And it gets even bigger. I mean, the Vikings team, for instance, has a massive Viking ship outside of their stadium, and the sail is a giant display. And they basically run things onto this, and it's distorted and all the rest. So you have to play with backing up the distortion and all this. I got to have a play with it at one point and do some stuff with it. It's nuts, but again, it's just one of these fantastic things. And then you look at the MGM Sphere being built out in Vegas. This is a giant sphere that they're building that has a massive display, dome display on it, with integrated acoustics, projected acoustics, so they can actually project at various audience members and say, right, project at them and they can hear this particular sound, but other people can't hear it.
Oh, wow.
It's a crazy arena that they're building out there. Yeah.
This is going to be an arena that just looks like the moon? Or
that's the exterior. So the interior has a display, but also the exterior has a display.
Oh, wow.
So when you're looking at it, the exterior has a giant display going on. And when you're inside, it's sort of a half dome. So they've got seating up one side at obviously a pitch, and then you're looking forwards at a dome in front of you, which is hemispherical, and then it goes down and around, and then they've got a stage in front. So you could have, say, Hamlet going on, and they're doing this, and then behind them on this ridiculously good-looking display is a big ship crashing in waves or something like that. It's nuts. It's probably the highest tech display that's going to be for large scale audiences going out. And they're building a few of these.
Just building a little mini light up planet. I need one of those for my office.
Yeah.
Hemispherical display. Yeah.
Yeah, I need a hemisphere display office. So like I
Now
can see the whole thing.
there's a couple of ways to do, well, there's 3 ways that I know of you could do this. One is to do rear projection systems. One is to do front projection systems. So you actually have projectors that then map out and you distort those projectors and overlay them to basically give you the images. The way they're doing it, if I remember correctly, is it's an LED display. It's just a fantastic wall. And when you look at things like Mandalorian and you look at a lot of these ones, that's what they do. There's a giant LED wall going on. And the XR space for those displays is massive at the moment because this removes the green screening effect and they can actually light the characters. So every time you look at one of these giant spheres that they use for filming and building film, one of the things you'll see is nearly all of them do a spaceship scene. Well, not a spaceship scene, sorry. An astronaut walking on the moon or something like that with the giant mirrored front that they've got on. And one of the reasons that they all do this is because when the displays are going off, the reason that LEDs are next level from green screens is that all the reflections that happen on your actors are the real scenes around them. So look at The Mandalorian. If you were to do that in green screen, the post-process stuff you'd have to get people to do on that is ridiculous because you'd have to be removing this green from the armor all over the place and replacing that with probe lights that basically work out what would actually be displayed on those and then give you the reflection effects all over them. And that's massive amounts of work as opposed on a film. Whereas with the LED screen, they don't have to do that because the metal that he's wearing is reflecting the LED screens that are out in front of them. And that gives them the realistic view straight away. So they add extra. It's not just, oh, great, now I have to remove the fuzzy green outside of all of the around the arms and around the helmet and all the rest of it. They don't have to do that, but now they don't have to do the other one. And you'll notice that some of these actually have giant LED screens above the characters as well. Again, to produce realistic lighting on those characters as they're walking through the scenes or they're moving them around. And if people are actually interested in this, there's like a behind the scenes Mandalorian and how they build it video on YouTube. And I suggest you go and watch that. It's crazy amazing.
It really
all Unreal Engine. And it will give you an appreciation for how these things are actually built and what they're doing and how they're taking over the industry. It's not just, that they're going to be used here or there or in a sci-fi film. They're using these for everything. There's a company that recently I watched a talk on them, and they're doing vertical takeoff and landing aircraft. They're building eVTOLs, so they're basically electric vertical takeoff and landing vehicles. Their marketing,
like that GM one.
Yeah, like the GM one. This company, I'm going to forget the name. I'll look it up in a moment. They actually, I'm going to look it up because they actually had a display going on and it was pretty goddamn impressive.
I think what's really neat about those, if I remember correctly, when the camera moves, the entire scene moves so that the camera always keeps the right frame of reference or whatever, the right angle. That's probably a really trippy experience to be in the booth when that happens. But that's really clever and it's crazy. I do think, though, I saw just a little bit of a Book of Boba Fett the other day, and I felt like I could almost tell where the line was. Like where the practical rocks ended and the virtual world began. But I could be just imagining it in my head.
Yeah, sometimes, especially if you work in the industry, you can start seeing things happening. There's the warping where the floor is to where the sides is, especially if you're using an LED floor, is very hard to compute. And if the scene's actually moving, so the characters are walking along, it sometimes can become more apparent where the actual stitch is between the side and the floor, because it's a hard stitch. They're not using old green screens. They used to actually have a curve at the bottom of the screen.
Yeah.
Which would basically take off a seam and they'd basically warp there. But with some of these, they have the hard seam. You actually see that hard seam in this video. So this is a company that is producing this VTOL aircraft. Now they're using a game engine to create a backdrop. So this plane is not obviously flying, but they created a screen with two backs, walls, and a floor. And then they basically play this video behind it, and it looks like it's flying along in the world. And this was a big marketing event they actually produced. So you can see here, it's especially when it's flying through clouds, it just looks awesome sauce. And again, this is a game engine running displays with realistic characters, in this case the aircraft, but this is a real aircraft right in front of it.
I expect Disneyland to be using this within 5 years.
Disneyland already uses a lot of this already. Oh yeah,
it's been a while since I've been there.
If you've been to Rise of the Resistance,
Jason has.
Yes.
Which I recommend if you're into game engines and stuff like that. You don't have to be into Star Wars, but if you're just into immersive experiences, that thing is crazy, like amazing. And there's a section in it. You go through a pod and you're driving through the world, and there's bloody AT-ATs, giant AT-ATs around you and all the rest. That's crazy enough, but then you actually get into a simulation and it drops you from the ship and all the rest. And that's a full screen, and it's a full motion simulator that you're actually in at that point, in the buggy that you've been driving around in all around. And that, again, uses some of this tech to produce that sort of thing.
The first experience I had with anything like that was actually at a Unite convention in Los Angeles years ago. And they used to have a big party at the end of the convention. It was at Universal Studios. So free rides, there was only a portion of it. Free rides, and one of the rides was the Transformers ride. And so we would go on it over and over, and by the end, you've gone on it. So now you're looking around to see how it works. You got 3D glasses on, and so all the screens are 3D screens. So now you're looking at it, and you're like, oh, shoot. When we're actually on an elevator at one point, but the screen doesn't move up, but has got motion. So they mix the motion of your car actually moving up and down an elevator with whatever's happening on the screen, so you don't feel the motion, and they just trick you. It's really clever. And this one, I could just 3D glasses, but man, I can't even imagine.
So I talk about some of this on my channel because I've obviously got a motion simulator with a virtual reality headset that moves you about and does all the rest. And some of the stuff I do is I talk about how to cheat, how to make people believe they're turning when they're not really turning, even once you've reached the extent of what the motion simulator can actually do. So the motion simulator has a 15-degree angle here or there. But you can return people back to zero without them noticing, and then just move them again. Or you can run particular waves through it to make them think that they're moving. So you get them to the edge, but as they're getting to the edge, it starts doing this because it's a mechanical piece of machinery. And because it keeps doing that, they're like, oh, wow, I'm still moving. So you give that initial impression, and you keep moving the waves along, and they keep thinking that they're moving along when they're not really doing that. And they use those sort of tricks at Disney and all the rest of those sort of things.
Wow.
Yeah,
so
really
I'm
cool.
trying to put more of that stuff on the channel.
That Unite event at Universal, that was really cool. I did the same. I went on that Transformers ride probably 10 times in a row because you didn't need to get off. It was the one time where there wasn't a line for it. It was actually a really cool Unite. It was a great way to have like a little party and get everybody out doing things and hanging out outside.
Yeah.
That didn't require everybody to be drinking at a bar.
Yeah, that must have been a very expensive party.
I'm sure it was expensive, but it was definitely a good one.
Yeah.
So before we move on, there were a couple other things I wanted to talk about today, but I wanted to first remind everybody to hit the thumbs up button and just share the stream. I totally forgot to ask at the beginning, so if you don't mind, if you enjoy it, just hit the button and go drop the stream out on Facebook or whatever things you use. I totally forgot to do that before we got started, so it does help a lot, and we definitely appreciate it. Also, I wanted to mention a conference that's coming up where they're giving away a PlayStation 5. Let me see if I can pull it up on here. Can I do it with this little thing? I'm trying to play with the pen here. So Backtrace has their Breakpoint event where they're giving out a PlayStation 5 to, I think, somebody randomly who's attending. But it's just a game developer summit that's completely free, and it's coming up in a little over a week, so a week and a half, February 16th. You can just go register for it. totally free. I figured I may as well mention it here because people that are here will probably be interested. So go check it out. Link down below in the description if you want to register, or if you just want to try to win a PlayStation and find out more about it. So go check that out. And then also the lightning deals are up, and I want to make sure that I don't forget to mention those. So there's a bunch of, I put them in the description as well, but there's a bunch of stuff popping up on the lightning deals, and I've got quite a few of them in my cart right now. In fact, maybe I should just pop up my asset store cart and show you some of the ones that I'm going to grab myself, or that I'm going to at least try to race everybody for myself. All right, so here, let's pop it up, and I'll show you real quick. I don't know if there was anything you guys were looking at grabbing. I was going to get this Mega Animations pack, which actually somebody recommended in the architecture meeting. Better UI. I haven't played with it, but it looked kind of interesting, so I wanted to try it out. You can't really see this. It's not like popping up right off screen. So Better UI, which was one on it looked like it made it. I don't. If you guys used this one before, it looks like it makes it so you can just build a UI with kind of a drag and drop editor
I
and
haven't used
snapping.
it yet. I might own it, but I haven't used it.
No, I haven't used that.
Yeah, it looks pretty cool. So I wanted to check it out. This stylized fantasy elementals. I don't really have a good use for it, but it seemed really cool. Like when I looked at the videos, I was like, man, these elementals look super freaking cool. So if I can get them at 70% off, like I'll probably grab them. And then what was the other thing I had in here? I had like two other things that a lot of the stuff that was really cool I already had. So I was like, oh, I already have that. I already have that. Oh, the sprite shaders, which just looks freaking awesome, and the quest machine, which looks like it's a full-on quest system, and I mostly wanted to get that one because kind of curious how they put it together. The sprite shaders look really cool though. Look like kind of thing that just about anybody could use to make something kind of neat. Just take a 2D game and make it a little bit cooler. I don't know if there was anything that you guys were excited about on there, but those were kind of the ones that I've added to my cart. And I know I can't buy them from my cart. I have to like click and race everybody the second they come out to hit buy now instead. But I wanted to put them in there so I at least have a good track of the ones that I want to get.
There's one called Rocky Hills Environment Mega Pack. It looks. I have a soft spot for pretty environments, so I'm always gonna like talk about those. But that one looks really neat. I do wish their sample video was using the Unity recorder rather than just a guy walking around with the frame rate drop and other stuff. But yeah, that one looks really pretty.
Oh yeah.
I just like I want to be able to buy all of these, throw them all in a project, and not have it be super heavy because I've got like way too many textures and way too many grass cards and stuff. I just want it to be automatically like buy a whole bunch of stuff and optimize it for me so I can mix it all together and then click a button to add, seasons.
Wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah.
You just have to add in the winter shader.
But I want to transition too. I want to be able to transition and also transition like this is one thing. This is something that I've been thinking about building myself because I don't think it exists on the asset store yet. I want like a foliage that has blend shapes or morphing between different seasons. So spring it grows, and then at some point the berries pop up or the flowers pop up, and then they'll come down. And you have like a submorpher for nighttime, so the flowers close at night and open. And then once it certain temperature hits, it goes and withers and goes into fall mode, and then maybe it disappears for winter, but then comes back. I would love to see foliage that has a full range of season built into it, so you don't have to do any thinking. It's just hook it up to your calendar system essentially and weather system, and it will do its thing.
Build it.
Yeah, I need a little bit more time in my life. But yeah, it's literally on my head, like constantly, that this is something I want. And I think I asked Nature Manufacturer, the guy who makes, there's a lot of really cool environments. I was like, hey, this new mountain one. The new mountain one has, I think, like mushrooms and stuff on trees. I was like, oh, are those collectible? And they are, apparently. And so then I was like, oh, can you make them like morph and grow?
That would be cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so for me, like Andrew, I like to collect certain ones. I like architecture buildings. So there's something called the Piano House, which is an ArcViz project. That's going to be on, and that looks very pretty. So I kind of fall for these
I thought
really
it was
pretty.
going to be a house that looked like a piano at first, and I was like, "What does a piano-shaped house look like?"
Does. That is a
Every tile you
piano-shaped
step on
house
has a note.
that's got a piano inside it.
Oh.
I wonder if that's based on an actual house somewhere.
It's based on the same architecture style, the neutral style that the Barcelona house is built on. It's based on and all the rest, but like floating roof on glass with very little structure and support into it. I'm a massive fan of that, and I really wish I'd moved into a house like that. But my wife likes the farmhouse look, so yeah, she won. Yeah. The other ones for me is I haven't got a lot of tech ones. It's more asset-y style ones. But for looking at your thing, Jason, that you were showing the other day, there's a sci-fi modular base coming up, and I do lots of sci-fi stuff, so I'll probably be looking at that one as well. And there's so many sci-fi modular bases out there.
Which one is it?
Let me. I'll probably have to give you a link for that one because.
I should do my job, by the way, and mention there are a couple Infinity PBR things that are in the Lightning sale.
Probably got them all already.
Yeah,
if people haven't, why haven't you already got them?
It's possible. The medieval village, the dragon, the character portraits, and I think that's it. But job done. Check box.
The village and the dragon?
Yep.
Oh, we'll have to pull those up. Wait, do I not have this one? Sci-fi modular base.
I don't have this one, and I have nearly.
Apparently, I don't have this one. It's going in the cart. I'm going to be racing you tomorrow, Dave. Hope you're ready.
Yeah, good luck.
Race for the discount.
So yeah, there's that one. There's a couple of other space bases on there, and I'm not sure. There's a modern supermarket I was thinking of getting because there's been some people that have approached me about VR training for supermarkets, so I might grab that one quickly just for work. Though the only time I would ever use a supermarket in games if I could blow everything up off the stores and do an FPS in there. There was actually a game I worked on way back in the day when I was working for Sony called 8 Days. And there's a video out on YouTube that should have never been linked. And it's the reason 8 Days got some of its notoriety, where they're actually in like this petrol station supermarket and they're having a gunfight and the crisp packets are exploding and things are blowing off the shelf and the shelves are destructing and all the rest of it, and it's crazy amazing. It was done for the PS3 way ahead of its time, and then it got canned by Sony because but yeah, that's the only reason I'd really use a supermarket outside of the boringness of VR training somebody on how to stack shelves or do some other crap.
What kind of training would there be for supermarkets? I'm just curious. Like, is it really like stacking shelves, or is there some other like thing that actually makes a little more sense to train on?
A lot of people think of this and they think, well, why would they do something like a stacking shelves training or how to clean the floor training or what goes into this? Go remember, when a new person starts at a supermarket, they don't know the level of cleanliness they have to get to. They don't know what the best way of stacking shelves is or moving new product out or anything like that. So what happens is somebody has to train them in doing that. So you've now got two people performing the action to go and train that person how to do that. And they have to do it a lot of times. And then they have to look at that trainee and say, did they do a good job? And then when they walk away and let that trainee do it for their first time, they then have to go back as a supervisor and check, did they have all the labels out front? Are they pushing products forward that are around those that have been taken off the shelf? Are they putting the right thing with the right thing? So they have to go and do all this thing. So you're paying that supervisor to go and check on those things. And they have to do that a lot of times for a lot of employees. And there's a massive amount of turnover at supermarkets. And then you've got Christmas promotions and there's people that come in just to work for Christmas. And now you've got all that training. So part of it is saving the supervisor or the person that we're training, saving the time on them having to train every individual on how to do this stuff. and them having to check on all the stuff that goes out there. So these people do the VR training and then they get graded on, you did a good job here, you did a rubbish job here, you need to get better at this, this, and this. And then when they go back into it, the system then goes, okay, they did this well last time, they do it again, and it goes, okay, they're now better or they're now worse. Something's wrong with this person. We need to get them going. So it's not just big manufacturing, which is obviously a hell of a business, or VR training where they teach people how to do medical procedures or anything like that, which kind of makes sense to all of us. Oh, you don't want to kill someone. In manufacturing, for instance, it's saving the supervisor's time, but also saving the amount of product that gets used. So if I'm producing some sort of plastic or something like that, and I'm having to train somebody on how to do it, they're going to mess up again and again and again and again. That's material that's getting wasted. A lot of time that material can't be reused, so it helps towards your sustainability goals. So it's not just there's somebody there that seems like a really easy task. A lot of times it's like, it's an easy task, but can they do it? And do I have to have somebody checking on them? And can I do that automated? If I have somebody that turns up as a new employee at a supermarket and I say, right, for the first hour, here's a VR headset, get in there and train on everything to do with the supermarket. After that hour, they're way ahead of just having somebody turn up and wait for the supervisor to show up to then take them around the store. And that supervisor might forget something. The supervisor has to have a checklist. You get them to a higher level quicker. And we've proved that in VR training. We can take people that would take months to train on something and move it down to weeks and reduce the amount of lost goods or product and reduce the amount of time the supervisor is actually checking on them and make it safer. Some of these things, you can lose an arm. And even in working in supermarkets, they have forklifts. They have particular large goods stacked. Okay, don't go and try and empty a pallet that's 3 stories up on a ladder because you're an idiot. It's things like that stop them then getting sued because they never told that person not to do that. They just stick them in VR training and say, here you are, you're in the warehouse in the back of the supermarket. You have to get these items. What do you do? Well, I go and get the person that can operate the forklift to be able to go and lift that up. And that forklift is then a separate VR training program that can be used.
Right. Yeah, I think as you talk it through, it makes a lot more sense because you can see you get to a scale of needing to do lots and lots of people, so it becomes a time saver there on that supervisor, like I said, and you get standardization across all of the stores and all of the training. You don't have to worry about the trainers all teaching exactly the same thing and missing anything. And I guess you get that benefit of you can have them stock shelves without having to go clear out the type of shelf that you want to train them to stock and have it all ready or wait for that specific time. And then so it does make sense. I guess I was just so used to thinking of it in the context that, like you're saying on the other side on manufacturing, where you're worrying about them getting a serious injury or causing $500,000 in damage because they over tightened something or put a piece in the wrong place or something to some big piece of expensive equipment, which those cases always made sense to me. But I think now after you explain it, even the more, I guess, mundane type tasks, still there's a lot of value, assuming that you're at scale. I think if you have a tiny little, corner shop and you're hiring one person every couple months, they're making sense. But if you have a giant supermarket, like you said, you've got turnover and you probably have a chain of them, it makes a lot more sense to really standardize all that stuff and save yourself the time at the scale. So, new info for me. I guess it's a new insight for me. I hadn't thought about it that way before, so that's helpful.
It's working for me. That's what I make my money doing at the moment, just consulting on these people and then concepting these training programs for them and all that. So yeah,
all that from a supermarket asset.
yeah, exactly. And that's the thing. A lot of times with this new tech, you can basically buy something like this, knock something up, throw it to a company and say, have you ever thought about doing this? And they'll go, oh, that's cool. And suddenly you've landed a big contract to go and build that stuff for them. So say, for instance, you have dragons, you've got a dragon showing up there and you're like, here's your dragon. You don't want to crash that dragon. Well, you're going to build a VR training program that enables you to fly the dragon. So now you've got VR training for dragons and you buy, obviously, the Infinity PBR dragon for this because it's the best dragon to have. And
it's on sale. Yeah. Oh, about to be on sale.
And about to be on sale.
Yeah.
The lightning deals, is it a different deal every day or is it every other day? It's every day, right?
It looks like like I saw some that are starting 5 days and some that
Yeah.
start 1 day, so they look like they're spaced out.
Okay. Because I
Which
know I saw some in 3 and I saw some in 1, and I didn't know if there were any in 2. But I have to look through. I just
But it
get
doesn't
keep an eye
say
on.
the hours yet. I know when I got reached out to for these, it listed the specific hour that it would start,
Oh,
but
okay.
the website isn't showing that yet. So I think
Interesting.
when it's 24 hours, Black Friday would show like 24 hours in advance with the exact hour or minute, I guess that would be.
Oh, like the little countdown, yeah.
Yeah, countdown timer clock.
We'll have to do a stream about some sales when they come. All kinds of stuff on here.
Yeah,
And
'cause
then
it starts in a day, doesn't it?
yeah,
And
it's
yeah,
tomorrow.
the
Yeah.
earliest ones are 1 day, but I don't know. I mean, that's obviously more than 24 hours, though, right? If it's 1 day,
I think so,
but
yeah.
not
Yeah.
24-hour countdown clock. So
My guess is we'll get a 24-hour clock like either at noon or midnight or something. Wait, 24 or maybe it'll be like 9 p.m.
I wonder if it's like 47 hours, will it say 1 day? Like, what's the cutoff?
Oh, and round up. I don't
Yeah,
know.
round down, or yeah.
How would you code that, Andrew?
I have no idea. If I
Just
guess,
do days and you cast it as an int. Round
but
down to the lowest.
do you round? I mean, you can't round down below 1 day, but do you say if it's 36 hours? Do you say 2 days? Is that
Well,
more
you could
logical?
just get the date time dot days, and that would be 1. It'd be 1 day plus 16 hours, maybe,
Hmm,
depending on how they got it. I
interesting.
wanted to ask you real quick, Andrew, about blend shapes. So you'd
Yeah.
mentioned that a minute ago with plants,
Yeah,
and it happens to be kind of
it's showing in the
very
dragon right there.
visible right here. So can you just explain what that is and what kind of, I think now that we have some visual context,
Yeah.
explain what blend shapes are and how they work?
So blend shapes. This is. I'm not the actual modeler who does the Katie, my wonderful animator who's been doing all the animations for these for the past 5 years or whatever. She does all the blend shapes, but it's basically you create the base mesh, the model, and then you bring it into Maya or 3D Studio Max or whatever, and you create different states. So, like if the neck is bigger or smaller, those are 2 different states. So you've got 3 essential models, and you set it up in such a way where you use blend shapes to blend between these states. So the mesh itself will move between 0 and 1 and anywhere in between. Usually that's used for animations. So instead of a bone animation, you use blend shapes. So you mesh the morph, and you get this smiles and talking or motion through animations. But you can do non-animated blend shapes as well, and that's what we're doing here. So that there's essentially a ton of different states of the character on the mesh itself. And then inside the skinned mesh renderer in Unity, you'll have a big list of all the potential blend shapes, and you just slide them back and forth and see what they do. You can do that with the animated ones as well, I think. So you can like manually affect those. With the non-animated ones, of course, the animations won't drive that, so they'll do nothing unless you affect them. And so I have a script, a blend shapes manager script that basically takes that into account. It manages the shapes. So like some shapes, like let's say your biceps, you want them to go bigger or smaller. And so we have a naming convention using plus and minus at the end that the script will then take it and create one slider where 0 for both of them is in the middle. And then you can slide up to make it bigger. You can slide down to make it smaller, and it will manage both shapes at the same time. Because otherwise, if you have them both up, then it will counteract each other, and that gets some weird stuff. And we also go deeper, like if you do have those biceps but you're wearing armor, the armor will have a shape that matches the others, and the script will link them all up together. So if I make the bicep bigger, any armor that's on it will also get bigger. And so long as they are created to at 100% be at the same position, they should morph together pretty well, where it just looks like they're both growing and shrinking together.
Nice. And it's like a technique for doing customizable characters. The kind of thing you do like when you make a character in an RPG or like an MMO, you're like adjusting the character. You can do that all with blend shapes and do the same kind of thing with armor. Seen it done before. It works out pretty well.
Yeah, and you can go deeper. I think we haven't tackled this yet, but I'm pretty sure there's a way to do it to mix bones into the mix as well. We don't modify the bones, so we're limited to what we can do. Like I can't make arms longer. on a human, because that changes the bones, and suddenly the animations that use the bones will be all whack. You know, so but there is some way. I know there's a way. I just don't know what the way is to actually go deeper and modify the bones along with the rest. And I think that's how a lot of the games where you can make the character more lanky end up doing that.
Yeah, we used to do a lot with the face for lip syncing and stuff like that with the blend shapes.
Yeah, and all the AR VR kit shapes are blend shapes essentially, so that when you bring it in and you know your Apple phone or Android matches your face to your Animoji or whatever it is, we'll use blend shapes for that.
But this is also like you've got a character coming up to you in the world, and you specify, you do the animation for A, E, I, O, U, and you have all the mouth movements, and then you have the blend shapes between those, and then you say, well, this particular one's going to have this, this, and this, and then you link those all up. They're super cool blend shapes.
Yeah, there's actually one of my previous animators, a guy named Davey, very cool guy, works in VR space now. He was the one who introduced me to it with our Serpent Warrior, I think was the first one, or maybe the Anubis. But he had techniques where we had like the Anubis has a anklet ring basically on his ankle, and he was able to create blend shapes that would duplicate that up. So there could be 10 or 1 or 0, and all through a blend shape. So it was more than just making it bigger, but he was able to then duplicate things in an interesting way, which is quite, I don't know how he did that, but it was pretty phenomenal. So he introduced that, and without him, we wouldn't have blend shapes and mesh morphing in the packs. So yeah, big impact on it all. But it makes it really cool. Like all those weapons, you can end up making multiple types of weapons just from a single one, especially combining with sub meshes and other things. It's a huge variety.
That'd actually be a good video. I don't know if I've seen many videos with tutorials on showing, in Maya or Blender or something, how you build the blend shape and then put it through and run it in Unity, etc.
I would be very interested in that, especially if it came from the perspective of not knowing how to use Maya for shit. Assume that I'm a 3-year-old that can't use Maya and doesn't remember the hotkeys or the mouse buttons or anything.
There's plenty of tutorials out there for Maya. I'm definitely not doing that. It's funny, every time I do
include those parts in the steps.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Right? Yeah. If I got to click the middle button and drag some weird hotkey, tell me those parts in there.
Yeah, I feel bad every time I load up Maya and I do a little bit of tutorial in Maya and it moves into Unity. I'm like, I should really be showing this in Blender because everybody uses Blender for the indie development now.
Blender's the free one, right?
Yeah. Whereas Maya is not.
No,
the
not free.
I just can't bring myself to move over to it because I basically built a career in Maya and I'm not gonna. Because I used to be a Maya tools programmer way back in the day. And now I can't. Every time I open up Blender, I cry a little bit. From me, it's not that I hate Blender because I don't want to get that hate speech back at me.
Right. No, it's just if you're already good with Maya and it's an industry standard, you may as well stick with it. There's no need to learn another. It's like learning an extra engine until you need it. Mm-hmm. Not a lot of use. And learn it a little bit, but keep with the one that you mastered. And the answer to the question that popped up, are you saying that you don't need Blender to create models with bones and can just use Unity? That's not the stuff that Andrew was showing, at least. No, there is an asset that lets you do some modeling in Unity. I think it's UModeler, and there are probably some other alternative ones. I'm terrible at all modeling, though, so I don't really have any thoughts or opinions on it.
I think just assets that let you create bones, too. I don't know how good they are compared to using Maya, or 3D Studio Max or Blender, but I bet the dedicated tools are probably better.
Much better.
Yeah,
and it should be pointed out. I pointed this out to somebody literally last week. There are auto rigging tools in Blender and Maya and 3D Studio Max and stuff like that. Before you start doing bones and stuff, have a look at those, because if you're thinking about building a humanoid skeleton from scratch, you literally can press your mesh, press auto rig, and it rigs it up for you pretty damn well. Save a hell of a lot of time. I see too many people like building these rigs in the person. Start with the standard.
That's fair.
Yeah, automatic rigging is nice. That reminds me, I've got a rigging problem. I'm gonna have to run by you sometime offline, Dave. The really simple one, or I think it's simple. Having a problem getting it to auto rig in Mixamo, and I think it has something to do with the head bone setup, but I'm not completely sure.
Mixamo, are you exporting with the Unity? Because there's
I'm
free
trying to
options.
import it into Unity is the problem, or into Mixamo
Yeah.
is the problem.
Oh, into Mixamo.
Into
Oh.
Mixamo, it's erroring out.
Okay, we
I
can look at it.
think that it's related to the bones in the head. I think that it has a jawbone in Unity, at least, that it thinks is something else, or it has an antenna that it thinks is a jawbone. I think that's might be screwing it up, but I'm not sure exactly how to fix it. So sometime
Okay.
when there aren't a bunch of people watching me stumble through Blender, I'm gonna have to ask you to see if you can just tell me what if it
So
makes sense.
they're watching both of us stumble through Blender. And,
Yeah.
oh my God.
Or Maya or whatever it is. Just see.
Yeah,
if
send it to me. I'll do it in Maya and pass it back.
take a peek. Yeah. Our art is still my definite weak point. That said, I am getting a bunch of art made, and I might eventually put some of it onto the asset store. So I've been meaning to ask you, Andrew, since you do a lot of stuff on the asset store. Do you have any just general thoughts on like recommendations for things that should be done with the art, like stuff like polygon counts, things that should be included, animations, like should things be split up, should have a bunch of sub meshes, should have multiple versions of the characters. I think you'd mentioned something about LODs before,
Yeah.
and not doing those. Like, do you have just any general thoughts
Sure.
on what should be included if I wanted to like take a bunch of stuff that I had and make it into like a cool asset pack that
Yeah. So the big theme of it is that, you know, with the asset store, you're not building for one game, you're building for infinity games. Like, who knows how many games, how many projects, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years from now, what type of devices will be out there. So my philosophy there is to build for the highest quality, knowing that people can always make it lower quality if they need it to be more optimized, but you can't go the other direction. You can't make it higher quality at this point. You know, so for poly count, I mean, I still see people, you know, messaging me asking about poly count. What's a poly count? And I'm like, I actually don't know. I know it's not crazy high. Like, it's game ready. It can run real time in game. They work on mobile. My characters were working on the iPhone in 2015, so they work on mobile just fine today, no problem. But I don't care what the polygon count is. You can use free tools to make LODs that retain all the blend shapes. Not all the tools do. So think about that fits your project. And I think a lot of, you know, if most people don't know what kind of restrictions they actually have when they're starting out, because first, what device are you targeting? Do you know every device that you're targeting, like every version of Android phone that you're targeting, the restrictions there? No, you don't. Most of us don't know that. Plus, how long is it going to take you to build that project? And if it's 2 years or 1 year, okay, now you're really thinking the next generation. And every year, phones get how much more powerful, right? So there's a good chance that by the time you finish your project, the phones will catch up to any issues you have. So there's all that. So I always release with a higher polygon. It's probably like in the sub 100,000, less than 100,000, but it's not like, you know, this Anubis is not 8,500 polys. It's higher. You can make LODs using tools to get it lower. And if that character is far away, you can get it down to 8,500 just fine, and it'll look great. But you got to do that for your project. And I'm not going to do that for you, because if I do that, then I'm going to pigeonhole you into thinking this is what I got to work with. And it's not true.
You've got to use the high and the ones that came with it. And that's it.
Exactly.
That makes a lot of sense.
So that's the theory on that poly count. The other thing is the reason why I do so much sub meshes, which again is less optimized than you know, like the human characters and even the Anubis is a full body. You know, you put on the armor, the chest doesn't go away. Now, in a real game, if you're going to be super optimized and you know you're never ever going to see this portion of the chest, no matter what wardrobe, what armor they're wearing, you're never going to see that. You're not going to model it. It's not going to be there. But for my stuff, I don't know what people are going to do with it. So it has to be created in a way that is modular so that people can do what they want to do. Otherwise, you're going to download. And this is what actually got me into creating stuff for the asset store when I was making the Barbarian, which, by the way, is named the Barbarian because I bought the Barbarians pack from Polygon Maker, It was the most modular possible, and I wanted modular wardrobe. I really wanted male and female genders. They didn't have that, so I just went with all male. But it was modular wardrobe, different skin textures. But in that world, you have to think everybody's going to use it differently. Everybody's going to want something different for their project. So if you don't make it as modular as possible, what you're really doing is cutting people out. You're limiting their options for their project, which, I think all of us, when we think about the project we want to make the project we want to make. So again, it's less optimized to have a lot of submeshes, but it creates a lot more flexibility. And there are tools that will merge meshes together, and there are techniques like, again, if your camera's far enough away, you don't need a lot of the small armor pieces that you'll never see, like the earring in the goblin's ear. If it's far enough away, you can turn that off, and you'll save a little bit of processing power and turn off one submesh. So I always add extra submeshes, and then things like animations. I don't include tons and tons of animations. They're fairly expensive for us to make. So we try to include the standards and a variety of attacks or magics, all the walks, runs if possible. Sometimes turning, idle, taunts, deaths, etc. But and I also include the rig files when possible, so that people can download it and create their own animations if they want to go deeper on that. But similar, it's the same concept for the music we produced. Is we provide the stems so you can remix it. The sound effects are there, but I also have a tool that lets you combine sound effects in various ways, so you can create kind of new sound effects that might better suit your project. But the whole philosophy for my assets, and I wish more publishers would adopt this, is to think, how flexible can I make this? And at the expense of optimization, especially since there are tools out there that will allow it to be more optimized, how flexible can I make this? And I think the last thing I'll say on that optimization, especially if you look at older packages from the Asset Store that were released in like 2013, 2014, some of the old manufacturer K4 projects are like this. They've got the Atlas textures. So they've got one map that has everything super optimized, one draw call for the entire thing. It's amazing. But when you go in there and you're like, I want that bucket, and it's a tiny, tiny portion of the map, you can't do it. And then other things, you're like, oh, I want to change the texture of the wall. Yeah, but you're also going to change the texture of all these other things because they share the exact same portion of that texture map. So you can't customize it the way that you would really want to customize it if you're making your own game that you want to, set the mood and change things to match what you want to do.
It's incredibly important. And I've come across so many assets that don't do that, and it's super annoying to have to break them up. And for people that aren't listening, like, even when you mentioned having the stems broken out in the music, that's excellent, because especially with Unity's new audio mixer stuff, you can put the stems in, you can have them each one lift up in turn, and you can programmatically bring things in and all the rest. Yeah, it's super important, and I'm really happy you guys are doing that.
Yeah. That's actually we don't produce music now because as much as people liked it, it was never a selling point, and that is expensive to have produced. Mm-hmm. Composers are quite expensive, but though we've got like 30 tracks or something throughout the different packs, and there is the audio mixer pre-set up. There's already 10 various mixes that I made exported, but when you make your own mix, there's also a button to export the final tracks. So you can remix them, and then just click this button, and it'll export every single track you've made, and it takes just a minute
nice
to make all your new music.
That is cool. And is that included in the the big character bundle?
A lot of them are, yeah. So a lot of the individual characters will come with music. The newest ones won't, because, again, I don't produce new music. So they're music packs by themselves. But like the Anubis has Sands of Time, I think I called it, which sounds sort of Egyptian, and we tried to match the music to the character. So as an example, the Medusa music was, we used, someone had made a recording of what music from ancient Greece may have sounded like, using their instruments and just interpretations of, and it was just a weird sound. So we used that as the basis of what we would make the Medusa's music sound like. So that one is quite different from the rest. So we do try and match the music to the characters, and then you can remix it. And then, I mean, if you just remix and take out everything but the percussion and bass, then now you have a completely different track. It's yeah. The power of being able to remix stuff is way bigger than I think most people might realize.
Massive. And the example I like that's shown in one of the tutorials where they're showing the audio mixer is building up anticipation in your level as well. Having the mixer in there, and you start with just the bass sound, and then you bring in the heavy drums when the enemy starts coming at you, which could be at any point when you move through a door or you're creeping around a corridor. And same with racetracks. As you're speeding up in a race car, having the extra audio mix come in that gives you that anticipation and builds the adrenaline in you as you're playing is super important.
One of the things I would love to do, this is probably would be very expensive for a composer to actually write this and take this into account. But in a project where a lot of games, RPGs and such, will have like good and evil, and maybe your character can go in one direction or the other throughout the game. And let's say you go to you're a good character and you go to the evil temple. The music might sound different. Like maybe certain stems are brought in if you're good in the evil temple, but if you're evil in the evil temple, it's the same song. Sounds kind of the same, but there's different music. So there's different parts of the music that are present in one case, but not present in another. And I mean, if you get really deep with that, you could start hinting to the player at various things by bringing in a certain sound that they only hear in certain combinations of their character and locations. And now you're in a cave, you start hearing that sound, and it's hinting at you that, oh, there's a secret over here that only you will be able to get to. And as you get closer, it gets a little louder. There's some really interesting ways to just add like Easter eggs and stuff into games that people will not necessarily notice, but they'll be engaged by it in a unique way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, horror games use this stuff a lot.
That's gonna be like Dave's game jam when he was telling me about, where it was a little bit hard for people to find the actual steps. Right, with the questions.
Yeah, I'd done a game jam last weekend, wasn't it? I done that one. Yeah, that's why I wasn't here. Yeah, so a guy I know, his name's Justin P. Barnett, and he. I don't know him. He has a YouTube channel. I watch his YouTube every now and again. Big on VR. Great YouTube channel. I'll find it in a second. Let me find it while I'm talking about it. Yeah, he done a game jam last weekend. There we go. Found it.
Searching and talking is always hard for me. I can't do it.
Doing anything and doing something else is always hard for me. Okay, so there's his channel. So he ran a game jam, and he's going to be doing a lot more of these. And he does a lot of intro to VR videos and tutorials and stuff like that. And he's a really good watch if you're into it. But anyway, yeah, he ran a game jam last weekend, and I took part in that. And yeah, I didn't have a lot of time. I had like 24 hours because my wife's like, yeah, you're always busy during the weekends. Maybe this weekend, let's not be busy. And I was like, okay, yeah, I'm doing a game jam. And she's like, yeah, no. So I only had a little bit of time to work on this one. But what I did is I used atmospheric music and a very simple game concept. So you're in a room, there's a TV in front of you that's giving you instructions, and you have to do an escape room. And his whole game jam was, let's build an escape room in VR, and everybody did those. And with this one, you would get instructions, and you could follow those instructions, but they wouldn't allow you to escape. There was subcontext in the instructions, and the audio I used within those made it scarier because I basically ramped up the reverb, which again, using those audio mixers in Unity, you can actually alter the reverb and everything on the fly. So you can take your audio in, your base audio with nothing on it. You can add reverb and move reverb away in your stems down your tracks and change the entirety of your audio. So I put basically reverb in the sound, so I would make it echo in the chamber around you. Yeah, Alone in the Room. Yeah, that's the one I created. It just adds to everything you're playing with. I really recommend people, if you're building video games, learn how to use those audio mixer tracks and learn how to use stems and everything. Buy Andrew's pack, and then get all the stems from that and start playing with them. It's good. Yeah, and yeah, Justin was playing my game in a stream the other day, and he scares very easily. And I'm not nice to people in games. I do scare the living crap out of them if I'm doing some sort of horror. So yeah,
Dave does tend to like to scare the crap out of people. I've seen it quite a few times.
I don't do jump scares.
Like the ones he's always at.
Yeah.
Always shows up.
Yeah, I don't do jump scares. I do psychological horror, and I like to freak people out. And my wife doesn't play my games anymore when I do them.
I don't think I'll play your games.
I got it.
You're not making it easy for me.
Yeah. Well, this one, the screen would basically ask you questions, and then certain questions were like, "Are you alone in this room?" And you have to raise an arm to say yes or no, basically, because they're on the left or right. And you look around, and it's a really dark room with some lighting at the top, and it kind of freaks you out. It says, "Are you alone in the room?" And you go, "Yes," and it goes, "Correct." And you're like, "Okay, I'm alone in the room." And then later on it goes, "Are you sure you're alone in the room now?" And you're like, "Yes." It's like, "Incorrect." It's like, okay. Very simple little things where people are having to answer questions. So if you just show somebody something on a TV and says, "Are you alone?" then it freaks people out a little bit. If they have to interact to answer that question, the psychological nature that goes into it just makes something, it heightens the awareness and makes it more scary, because you're concentrating on answering something which takes a little bit of your concentration away from your environment, which makes it more scary that you're going through. And it's things like that in psychological horror that I love to play with.
Yeah.
So yeah, VR game jams. If you're into that, go and check that guy's channel out and watch what he does.
Yeah, I'll drop a link in the description too, so people watching later can go check it out too. Andrew, back on the asset store one more time. I had one more question. So I know you're kind of answering a lot, and it seems like modularity is a lot more important than performance. And as you say that, it really makes a lot of sense, because I think about like all of the times I've downloaded assets, I didn't really care if they performed well, because I knew that if I was actually going to use this asset, I can have an artist fix it up, or I can LOD it myself, right? I can get it tuned up, but I want it to look good. And I have seen a lot of things that were probably LOD'd down and didn't need to be, and could have been a much better version. And I think that makes a lot of sense. I also really like the idea of modularity, but I was wondering, when it comes to like actually packaging up an asset and putting it onto the store, outside of like making the art good, modular, and all that, like, is there anything that you think is important to include in the assets when you're doing them? Like, you've done a whole bunch of these. Like, are there specific scripts that you would include or not include, or audio or animations? Like, what do you think like is important to include, and what's extra and not so important but you could do, or whatever, I guess?
So I think for any 3D character model, animations are a must. If it doesn't come with animations, it's not a full package as far as I'm concerned, because nobody's going to create, the basic animations. If somebody really wants to use it, they can take a rig, if you provide that, and create new animations. And there are tools that on the store that will let you create new animations. But if you don't have the basic animations, even if it's a humanoid, people won't like it. As an example, actually, I've got a horse Pegasus unicorn package. It doesn't come with animations, but it uses the same bone structure and rig as Malber's horse Pegasus package. So if you have both, then you can use their animations. Now, we do eventually plan to make our own animations, but I wanted to get it out. And I talked to Malber's, and he said, "Oh yeah, use the rig." And so it's the same rig. So anything that horse can do, our horse can do. We also have a unicorn horn, and we're building armor for it, so it's going to be really cool. But people don't like that package as much. It does not sell that well because there's no animations, and people don't want to buy both packages, even though tons of people already have that package. And I think it's a lightning sale too, but there's that. So animations are a must. I love sound effects. I think that's terribly important, and I know a lot of developers probably don't think about sound right away, but I do think sound adds just so much more immersion into using a character and prototyping and really visualizing what that final project might look and sound like, even if you know you're going to replace the sound. I mean, sound is kind of like any other art. If it's not done by the same person or people who are trying to match the sound, it might be a little weird. Like you'll get some that are louder than others, or some that sound more tinny than others, or whatever. But and that's why for all our sound effects, I've used the same guy who did the same Foley for all of them. He records all the sound himself. He's currently doing other stuff, which is why we don't have more sound effects. So I think that's terribly important. It's not a must-have, but I think it adds a lot. But I don't know if customers on the asset store take that into account, subconsciously, to add value as a value add, like, oh, it's worth $10 more because it has sound effects,
Right.
or I'm going to buy this one over that one because it has sound effects. I think that decision is going to be based strictly on the quality of the mesh and model, the textures, if whether it matches what they're going for, and the animations. And that sort of thing. I think that's the first thing. And then the modularity around wardrobe or interchangeable body parts. Like you showed a robot earlier. If there's like things you can turn on and off, that's really cool. And then for scripting is actually quite difficult. I know there's publishers on the store who purposely never add scripting because it means they have to support that scripting. And if they're not, coders themselves, every time Unity comes out with a new version, that's a chance that their script breaks. And I've experienced that a lot because I have a fair amount of scripting to run these blend shapes, to run, I've got scripts that make it so you can preset entire wardrobes and click one button or call one line of code, and the character's wardrobe just changes. So you can change from a knight to a wizard just by like that. And it does a whole lot of stuff behind the scenes because it also works with the blend shapes and the textures, and it gets deep, but it means you have to build the inspector code for it. You've got to do all this. And that takes a lot of time. And then supporting it, training people, teaching people how to use it, making sure your docs are up to date. Every time a new version comes out, it might break. So there's a lot going on there. So that's going to be a choice. I think it adds a lot of value because it makes it more easier to use, especially with with our humanoids. There's probably 100,000 combinations of wardrobe you could have with all the different packs. They all work together and all that stuff. So you need some sort of management system. I would almost be an asshole to release that and not have a management system, because dragging and dropping to make new prefabs and everybody writing their own management system would be a waste of the world's time. But it's something to consider from the publishing side, how deep you want to go with that.
So if you do scripts, but know that you're going to have to kind of support it and do a lot more because things will probably eventually change. I assume like the more advanced your scripts get, the more likely things are to change along the way, right?
Sure, and whatever. I mean, Unity might change something that affects that script, and unless you're really paying attention to the early preview releases, you're not going to know until it's released, and you're probably going to find out because for me, I use 2019 LTS for all my stuff right now. We're going to soon switch to 2020 LTS, but still 2019, which means I don't actively test every single thing in 2021 point whatever. So usually when something breaks, I find out because somebody tells me, hey, it's not working. And then I try it out and I'm like, oh, shoot, something changed. What the heck changed? And I have to figure out what changed. Hopefully it's a small thing. Sometimes the preprocessor directives could come into play there. But it certainly creates a whole level of potential headaches for you. And hopefully you won't get customers, which does happen, who go and give you a 1-star review because your package broke in the latest version of Unity and they don't know how to fix it. And the asset store will usually help you take those down because they're not actually a review.
Once you fix it,
yeah, even if you don't fix it, because it's a support request. It's not an actual review of the product. No need to drag the product down for something that's oftentimes is an easy fix, and a more experienced Unity user would realize what is going wrong and could even fix it themselves. And I've had some very nice people on my Discord tell me what the fix is and help me out with that. So nice. I'm grateful of that when that happens. It makes it a little easier.
That is super handy. I pulled up that robot you were talking about with putting parts on, and only because That's actually something I wanted to do with this. So if you have any suggestions for ideas on add-on parts or things that could be snapped onto them or replaced, let me know. Also, if anybody in chat has any ideas, I'm working on having this thing built up and just putting some more pieces onto it. So if you
I
got
mean,
some thoughts, ideas,
if you take that antenna on the top, so first that should be a submesh, both the
it
U
is. Yes.
and the stem to a submesh. That's cool. And then that's mesh morphing right there. That's prime.
That one's actually got bones on it, so it can animate and wiggle around.
Oh, you got bones too?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it
So
bends
maybe,
and twists and stuff. And I was thinking about doing like some spring joints on there so it could kind of like bounce and stuff
oh,
when you run around.
yeah. And it's a good tie-in for like, so there's a publisher on the store, Impossible Creations.
Mhm.
We've talked about their stuff before. They produce really small and really powerful, inexpensive things that do one thing really, really well, and they just have great tutorials. One of their things is bone, like animations to make it bones more realistic and other stuff like that. So maybe that's a good tie in there. But yeah, I guess if
think
you've
so.
got bones and you can't mesh morph it as much using my system without morphing the bones too. But prime candidates for mesh morphing as well there. I think it's hard to tell, but there's like the thigh might have little things on it. Those could be submeshes.
Oh, yeah. I see.
You know, the
The-
ears. You know, ears. could
I
be-
recently downloaded a robot and they done one with the rig and all the rest of it in the submeshes, but they also gave one that was just parts. So you could actually swap it and have all the arms fly off when they blow up. Or it was actually they'd made a picture of one robot holding like parts of the other robot up, looking like it was crying because the robot was destroyed. That was super useful.
That is really cool.
It's like when anybody provides you a zombie character and then they don't provide you all the limbs. There's things you can actually pull off. You're like, it's a zombie.
So
Wanna pull the
that's
arm
an
off.
interesting one. If each body part, each limb was a submesh that you could turn on and off, you could technically have a demo where, and this could be cool in VR too, where you pick up the arm and you go like this, and then particle, zzz, and then all of a sudden what you're holding disappears and the arm submesh turns on. So you could build yourself up and add your take off this arm, add a gun arm,
I like that idea of swapping out the arms with like different types of arms too.
Yeah.
Or different
Tools.
hands even, right?
tools and arms.
Swap the hand for a tool. Yeah.
Yeah.
Swaps for a wrench.
Ooh, good thing. I like these ideas. But keep sending them over so you get more ideas throughout the week. Send
You
them
haven't
over.
even talked about textures yet.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, how do you feel on it? So you're giving out a character or an asset with this texture set. What do you do? Do you do like a variety of other textures? Do you do a customizable texture with some sliders on it, or how do you like to set that up?
I used to have sliders. Because way back when substances were built into the engine, I would have sliders, and I would just use Substance Designer to basically build out one substance that let you add dirt and all this other cool stuff. As soon as that was no longer built in the engine, there's no way I want to support a third-party product. Plus, early on, it was actually destroying people's products that they're not built-in versions. So stop doing that. Now, for the high fidelity stuff, I'll provide multiple, usually 3 to 6 different pre-made versions I make in Substance Painter. But whenever possible, I'll also release the Substance Painter source file. So if you get Painter through Adobe now, you can load that up. And the structure I use, which I try to make it very well structured, and so you can see which parts are which, they're all named. And you can then say, okay, I want this metal to be a different metal. You just drag it over, export it. Now you've got your own custom texture. So now it's not built in anymore. But since I provide the source files, you can customize it if that's something you want to do. But otherwise, I'll just provide 3 or 4 or 5 pre-made textures. Take your pick. I haven't gone deeper with a shader to change hue for that. You could, where you could change it and have more things, but that would then require like masking or dynamic masking where you paint it with vertex, and it's too much. I don't want to get into that. For the low poly characters I've been doing though, that one, I followed the Cinti Studio model where it's just a texture palette is the texture itself, and it's just a diffuse. But we went a little bit deeper because I like customization, as you know, and so I built an editor script that the palette is actually just a color code palette that we use on all of them now. It's just random, 255, 255, 128, random hard coded colors. And then this script will separate them out. And now you've got, I think, 49 options. So there can be up to 49 different colors on one mesh. And you can just use sliders to change the hue, saturation, and value. Pre-save those. So as you're doing the sliders, you can see what is changing on the character. And I'll name them. So it'll be like body eyeball, body eyelid, body lips, body inner mouth. And then it's organized there. You can change them. So you can change the colors. You can then, of course, create presets. And so you can just click a button to change between the presets. So you can have all sorts of different color combinations. But also you can click a button to export a PNG of it. So if you customize it, now you don't want to deal with my code, you just want that look in your game, you can just click that, and then all of a sudden you've got the custom look that you want for your game as a PNG, so it's optimized, and it's not necessarily the same color that I gave you. Super professional asset.
I appreciate you sending the source on the textures because, I mean, like with this robot here, you've got a very dominant blue color on there. Having that as a separate layer in a PSD or something like that, I can literally pull up and change the color of and chuck it back out as a PNG myself. It's yeah, the amount of times I've had to take somebody's texture and find the color and outline it all and pull it off and then recolorize it and then put it back out. It's just a pain.
There was the standard back in the day, and you'll see this on a lot of the older assets on the store, was to provide, 3 or 4 different textures, but really it would be like that, but the blue would be green, the blue would be yellow, and it's just like, and each one's a different texture, and like, well, you could do that with a shader, and then not have to have 5 different textures, but it's so much more powerful if you just have, Substance Painter is like the standard now, so just provide that. And anyone who's serious enough about using this in a game now can go in and make the exact character that they want, and it won't necessarily look like everybody else's character, which is also a nice thing.
And when I hire people to build assets, I ask them to do that, to give me identifiable parts as separate sections, separate layers in the PSD. Give me the final PNGs. But make those a separate section. It's something I ask for in the people that make the assets for my particular games. So, yeah, it's great that you guys provide that straight off the bat because that's what I want when I download an asset.
Yeah. I learned too late to always get the rig file from the animator and rigger. So I could provide that and so that I can use it for myself. Because sometimes, Katie's the main animator I've worked with since the very beginning, but there have been others who they don't reply anymore. So if I need an update to a character, I have to re-rig it from scratch now. So I learned that lesson a little bit too late.
You guys or I guess Andrew, you had mentioned naming of the parts. And I was just kind of curious for both of you. Do you guys have a standard for what you name, how you name things in your meshes, or some recommendations that people should use? Are there like some just common docs or standards, kind of like there are for programming for the mesh naming of the different parts?
Yeah, I use Camel Case, but when you're for the meshes themselves and try and be as descriptive as possible without going crazy, joints are slightly different. Like look at your target, because sometimes things like when you're bringing in an FBX into Unity, it does sort of a name joint analysis sort of thing to work out, that's humanoid. Don't switch it over and all the rest of it.
Like the rig and the bones, getting the head, shoulders, and all that stuff, right?
Yeah, so it can be very useful to look at your target that you're going for, or when you're creating this stuff to get those named correctly. Plus, sometimes because you've got like spine 1, spine 2, spine 3, spine 4, spine 5. Okay, so spine 5, is that the neck? Is that the head? Is that the thing? So I like to be accurate with the naming on those sort of things. And as I say, I usually go for the sort of target I'm moving towards. But I use Camel Case like all the time. I try not to use underscores unless it's like necessary. But yeah.
Okay, and then for submeshes, like you've got a right hand, you just call that right hand, or do you call it like some hierarchy version of that?
I call it right hand.
Yeah. Sometimes I won't use right if I'm using mirroring. So if I'm using mirroring in certain things, it's hand, because hand is mirrored on both sides. But that's a lot of times down to like VR, and when you're creating prefabs and stuff like that, like you'll create a hand and then you'll mirror that hand for the left or right hand if it's got no differentiation into it. So I avoid nomenclatures like right or left, but when joints, yeah, it's right, left, and all the rest to basically have them correct. But just to be aware of, sometimes again you have to look at your target and what you're working towards as to whether you want to put that right in there, because then you create the prefab and suddenly right is on everything. Another annoying thing is when you're using things like hands in VR, is when you bring a hand in and it's right hand with the right index finger with the right thing and the right, and then you mirror it and then you're like, oh, left, going through all of them. So sometimes if I'm bringing a rig in and I've just done one hand that I'm going to mirror, might put right on the top level, but then not on the bottom. Because the other thing is when you animate that, if you've got set animations, then it animates them all as this is the right joint that's moving, that's the right joint that's moving, that's the right joint that's moving. And then when you mirror that, if the animations aren't mirrored over correctly, suddenly you're having to rename because these are all left now. And it won't target correctly in the animation. So it's something to keep in mind when you're building these things.
Interesting. We for our stuff, there's no set standard that I use. It's mostly probably set first by whoever modeled it, really. There's
the first person there sets the standards, right?
Yeah, and some who don't speak English as a first language will misspell things, and I think some of those may have even made it through to the final production because I'm not necessarily the best speller either. But one interesting thing early on with the human character that has a lot of armor, and when I first got it in, the modeler must have done some research or just knew and used the actual names for sabatons, and I don't even know how to pronounce it, but it's like PTURGS for shoulder armor and shin balls for the boots that cover your shins. And it was like the legit names for things. And I was like, oh, shoot, that's kind of cool. At the same time, leg armor is much more human readable.
Yes.
Knee armor.
People don't have to Google what that is. Like,
Yeah,
I don't know if they have those.
Napoleon, just say knee armor. And so I learned a bunch through that because I guess the little circle right here on armor has a specific name. And then the spike on that, we'll name it whatever that thing is, spike. And that is helpful because I don't know what I would call the little circle thing over the shoulder if I didn't know the official name, and I'd have to look up the official name again. But like what would I call? I have no idea. So it's certainly like something that I think about because I think it's interesting, but I have not gone to the extent of actually determining like, hey, we're always going to use this format. We're always going to do that, this thing or that thing. So as long as it's relatively human readable, I'm happy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Makes sense. And just make sure there's not like some standard I should be giving people, like some guides that everybody else uses, and I'm just the dummy that doesn't know. So
I don't think there is. I mean, there's some with the rig with spine and such that everyone uses the same words. But I know our humanoid rigs, they have neck and they have head, as well as the 3 spines or whatever. So it's still human readable there. I think that's the as long as people can generally figure out what's what, without having to mess around too much. That's the way to go. And in hindsight, I like using the real names for the various armor parts and whatnot, but it probably causes a headache because if you don't know them, then you don't know them. You just have to start remembering what each one is. And it's so much easier to say left shoulder armor, and left shoulder armor top for the top part and bottom and mid, but.
So what sort of assets are the most complicated for you when you're actually creating them?
The humans, environments and humans, but by far are super, super complicated. We're working on just hair right now, and hair is not terribly complicated, but it turns out it is because so we have got 3 base bodies. Each base body has 2 genders, and so any one hair mesh has to work on all of them. So it's got to be morphed to all of them. Then each one has blend shapes that change like the cranium slope, the size of the head, the ear shape, all these other things. So each hair mesh has to have match shapes to match all the potential head shapes. We're not even getting into account helmets and stuff. We're not even going to deal with that. If you put on a helmet, turn off the hair. That's just the way it is. It's way too hard to deal with every single helmet potential as well. But then you got to think about like the hair. You got a shader for the hair is going to be important, especially for hair. So now, the new hair pack is basically better hair than our current ones with better hair cards, new hair cards that we're making. But now we have a cap under it as well, because in some cases you can see through the hair and you see a scalp and that just doesn't look right. So we have a cap. But now the cap is causing problems because in some cases it's not blending correctly with the mask clipping of the hair. So now I think we're actually going to have to go back and redo the caps, which sucks because Katie, the animator, who did a wonderful job of setting these up, it took her, I think, 4 hours per hair, and there's something like 20-something hairs, and she's going to have to redo all of that, and I'm going to have to pay her for redoing all of that. So it's going to cost an extra couple $1,000 just because our caps, in the end, weren't quite right, and you could see them where I didn't want you to see them, and now we have to redo it. So it's going to take longer. It's going to be a great result, but these humans are super complicated. And then every time we add a new wardrobe, like people ask for dwarves all the time. People want dwarves. I want dwarves. And I actually was going to do dwarves after doing the half orc, but decided to, instead of doing that, to start moving on to the armor packs, because I knew I wanted armor packs that worked with all of these. And if I added dwarves, now we're going to have, instead of 6 bodies, we have 8 bodies. All of that armor has to be interchangeable. So every armor piece from the dwarves would have to be morphed to the other characters. All the blend shapes have to be copied over. They all have to start working together as much as possible. Any new bones for any dangling bits or whatever has to be copied over. So that means entirely new body meshes for each character. That's why the human character is on version 4, because we keep having to update the rig. And then when I create an armor pack, it means that those armor pack have to work with all of these characters. Again, matching all of them. So just adding one piece of armor becomes a cascade of updates across the board. And it gets very challenging and complicated and expensive. And then, of course, all the inspector scripts and editor scripts I have to build, not have to, but I want to build to make it easier just to manage all this stuff. So that if you have a game already and I release a new armor pack, like we've got a new villager wardrobe pack coming up, if you already have a character in your game, using that system, you can now get this new armor pack, drag in the new ones, create new ones, and you don't have to change the rest. So you don't have to create a brand new prefab. Just add these to the script, and you don't have to worry about a new prefab. So it's a lot easier, but that is more work on my part.
So changing tack, what about URP and HDRP? How do you deal with the? I mean, are you releasing as the SRP, the standard render pipeline?
Yeah,
and then allowing people to just do the updates themselves, which is a perfectly reasonable thing. Or are you doing specific URP and HDRP?
So I've taken the tactic of doing standard render pipeline because it's the base. From a commercial perspective, I want to target as many audiences as possible. For the URP, most of the shaders are standard shader. So they'll upgrade to URP. Just there's a button somewhere. I don't know where it is, but there's a button. I think it moved in the latest version, but there's a button. It'll work in URP. For HDRP, everything will work. You do have to manually assign the textures because for some reason there's no auto. I guess there's no standard shader type of thing. An analogy to the standard shader for HDRP or something like that. It will work. I have a Book of the Dead video for when Book of the Dead came out with my stuff working in that version of HDRP. So they definitely work. They look great, but it's more manual. For the custom shaders, like the hair shader is a custom shader and other ones, we've been producing multiple versions. So there will be a standard URP and HDRP. So you will have to choose if it's going to be shipped in standard. So if your URP, that'll turn pink. You'll have to change the shader selection and then it should just work.
Excellent. No, that's great. That's the best way, because the amount of times you now download things and it's impossible to move them about is a nightmare, because I predominantly work in URP. So,
I actually just faced the environment package. I use other packages in the demo. Like for the fire, I didn't want to create fire that's subpar, and I would have. So I instead for the demo got, I think it's Ian's fire pack. It's not expensive. It's on the asset store and it looks great. So I brought that in for the demo. So all the prefabs, if you have both, will show that fire. That package got updated to ship in URP by default, apparently. So now when you bring it in, all of my prefabs show pink fire. And you have to go and manually change the shader on all of those to make it work. So I'm like, shit, that's part of the problem with relying on other parties, because he changed to now ship in URP and I didn't, so it's now broken that direction.
Do you recommend against using other assets, or would you use them as at least as a placeholder until you can get something else in there?
I like doing it because honestly, I'm not going to create trees that beat all the other trees out there. It would be a waste of my time to do that. For the most part, although we do have the Book of the Dead, which is trees, but that's an asterisk next to it. So I don't see the value in recreating every little part when that already exists. Instead, I want to create stuff that doesn't exist yet. I want to make something that's either better than what exists or doesn't exist, because that's, I think, where we can add value to the entire community. The smart developer is going to mix assets either way. Like you're going to do your best to make them look like they match, and but more or less you can do that. But I don't think it makes much sense to recreate everything. In fact, the medieval environment pack, I wanted to make one years and years ago, but I was always hoping that manufacturer K4 would update theirs to be really modern. They kind of updated it, but it's not quite there. So I ended up creating my own and spending the time and money, and that's an expensive pack to create. Simply because nobody else was doing it the way I wanted it to be done, with the modularity, with the props, with the customizable textures, with the different options and all that stuff. Nobody was doing it, so I started doing it. Actually, to be fair, that's why I started. I talked about the barbarian earlier. I wanted better humans, and so I started producing stuff thinking, okay, I have a little bit of savings, which I had to get a full-time job because those were running out in 2017. I had a little bit of savings, so if I spend my savings on producing better stuff, I could put on the asset store and make money. It took a lot longer than I thought it would take to do that. It took about 4 or 5 years. I think I've been paying myself since 13 months ago, so it took a long time to get there. But the whole point was that I don't want to do what I'm doing, but nobody else was doing it. Nobody else was making what I wanted to buy, so I had to make it myself and then give it to other people to buy. I enjoy doing it. It's not like I hate this job. I actually really enjoy what I do, but I also have less time to spend on game development because I'm working on assets. So it's still fun. It's still a great hobby and side gig and all that. But if somebody else made better stuff than mine, like I've always said that if Unity were to come out with like a meta-human type human character thing that just made my humans obsolete, I would welcome that with open arms, convert all of our armor to work with that, and everybody would be better off.
Welcome Ziva Dynamics.
We'll see. Yeah. I signed up for their beta a couple of months ago, and then I talked to my modeler, and he said you really have to set up the mesh to work with that from the start, and so we didn't go further into it. It looks to me like a product not meant for individuals necessarily, although I'm crossing my fingers, not going to hold my breath though, that somehow all asset publishers can use it to rig their stuff, so there's like a standard way of rigging stuff.
Yeah, you kind of hope it's not just an answer to the Epic's meta-human thing, which you can. I've seen people building like trailers and stuff now with meta-humans and just going in and using it straight off the bat with Unreal and all the rest of it. You kind of hope that this will become that sort of thing, but
yeah,
and not just an answer. We went and bought the first company we could find that was really good, so that we could have something that looks as good as meta-human, so we could say, look, it's there. It's gonna come eventually.
Yeah.
Get it integrated.
Yeah, but you can imagine, I mean, if you take that along with the Weta stuff, you can see how they might work together to create, I don't know what, but some really interesting tech down the line.
Yeah, I think a lot of the wetter stuff is going to be just tons of post processing. Like you're going to build the stuff in Unity, and then when you render it out, it's all going to go through the wetter stuff to produce the film level thing. That's what I can see a lot of it being, rather than it actually coming into Unity itself, being more of a plugin. Kind of like that CAD stuff they did a while back, where you could load up CAD models in Unity and use CAD models, which is crazy. But it was an additional plugin that you stuck on top of Unity to basically use it. XYZ, I think it was called. They sent me a message about it because I was looking at some car stuff at the time. But it's not a fully integrated sort of thing.
By the way, if people want to enter to win the rider license, I already kicked off the giveaway or opened it up so people can enter. All you have to do is choose a class or a race and type it in, or both, and then you'll get picked. You'll go in and join the battle, and I'm going to start that battle in probably 5 minutes, and then the winner just gets a 1-year rider license. I think we've got like 2 or 3 of these left, so I'll have to see if they want to continue it on. But so far, it's been awesome giving out rider licenses, and lots of very, very happy people. Quite a few of them who were already rider users too. Yeah, lots of JetBrains fans on here. So if you haven't used Rider, I'd definitely go check it out and try to win, because it's a great tool for writing code, for writing game code at least. Yeah, that's all I ever write with it. Lots and lots of Unity stuff.
I use it, and I barely use it. Like, what I mean by barely use it, it's got tons of features that I have no idea exist, but I use it all the time, and I just like it. It's better than whatever I had before. So
yeah, they seem to just have like, I don't know if it's just that they have a team or a set of people there, but somebody there is focused on making the integration with Unity really good, and they've done I think an amazing job of it, and they're more focused on it than I think any of the competitors. So I'm a big fan. So hopefully somebody wins it and loves it, or whoever wins it does love it.
yeah.
Cool. So we talked a ton about assets and other things. Is there any other big topics you guys were wanting to kind of bring up and discuss? We've got lightning sales, maybe taking some questions. I was thinking maybe talking a little bit about Sony and Bungie, but first I guess I want to remind everybody to hit the thumbs up button. I just looked and there's only like 100 likes, so we could probably get that up to like 102 at least.
3 now.
So yeah, you guys, any big topics or new things going on game development wise, or other that you want to just make sure we bring up and mention today?
Well, there's been some news, hasn't there? The Activision acquisition by Microsoft might end up going to the Federal Trade Commission for investigation.
I'd heard that was a possibility that they might try to block it because people in the FTC have recently been looking at monopoly stuff and asking for rules about that.
Gone there, and then obviously, as you just mentioned, Sony and Bungie, but Microsoft is kicking themselves that they didn't buy Bungie when they done Halo. But there you go. And then Stadia.
Oh, what's going on with Stadia?
There's a report out this week that Google is kind of putting it to the back burner a bit and looking at it more as a streaming platform for everything rather than just concentrating on games. But that's a report from an insider that said something, and loads of reports are coming out about that.
Google would never kill a product.
Yeah.
Anyone that doesn't know, I think Google's killed more products than any company in the past in the history of
I think I get an email from Google every 3 months saying this piece of G Suite you're using is now moving to this piece of G Suite that you're using, and you need to change to this. They just changed all the business stuff to these new workspaces and everything. It's like, oh.
Yeah, it's probably a side effect of them making so many projects, but they have no aversion to starting something up and then just killing it. Be like, oh yeah, this thing's going to be dead next month or next year. I think a lot of time they'll give some actual good notice, but they definitely kill stuff all the time.
Yeah, it sounds like Stadia's being moved. From reading the reports of the guests, again, this is just some report that came up on like Kotaku or something. It sounds like they're moving it under another division to not just be games, to basically work with a lot of other tech partners on.
Yeah.
But, they got rid of their first-party studio that they were using for it, and it sounds like they're moving it around. So
I wonder what they've done with all the studios that were getting money to build Stadia games. If those are all just still in the same state that they were in, or if that's changing too. See, I remember when that was happening, like when Stadia was coming out, and they were kind of going around talking to different studios and trying to get people in there. So, and I know I talked to people who kind of at least were on the path of doing that. So I wonder how that went.
as somebody who's owned an indie game studio that was doing exclusives for a product that went away, i.e. Windows Phone, yeah, it tends to be, we've given you the money up to this point, but good luck with the rest. And then they kind of leave it because you're not a big enough name to know about the idea that they're going to remove a product. But again, all complete speculation as to what I have. But yeah, Stadia. So that was the other big announcement this week.
Nice. All right. One last reminder: anybody that wants to join and enter to win the rider license, just type in a racer class, and they're up at the top. You can just type tank or pirate or DPS. Apparently, I have 2 tanks in there. I didn't realize that tank is in there at the beginning and the end. I wonder what the difference is.
If someone just types in a race, will it auto assign a random class?
I believe they just get whatever the first class is. I think they end up with a tank and a knight if they don't pick both. So they end up with whatever the other one. It probably should have just been random, but eventually I want to turn this into like a big battle royale. So I'm going to give it like another minute or so, then start off the battle. And we'll just let that run while we finish talking about other things. So what about Sony buying the Bungie? What do you guys think about that?
It's a move. It's fun. I mean, obviously, neither me or you is in Sony anymore, but we still have friends there.
Yeah.
And this isn't any insider knowledge that I'm about to say, but is it a reaction? And is this going to cascade? Are you going to start seeing them just really trying to go for as many as humanly possible? I mean, Sony had to buy somebody. I mean, they literally are watching loads of studios. Microsoft is buying up left, right, and center. The other thing with Sony is they're in a game with Facebook as well, with Meta, because Meta's buying up VR studios left, right, and center, and Sony has a big VR play going on. So it'd be interesting to see how that plays out. They've got to start buying on both sides of the coin, and they're not as big company-wise as either Meta or Microsoft. So,
with Meta buying all these games, I saw the earnings report. They had a big issue there. Oops, they're spending tons of money on the
10 billion.
Yeah, billion, right, with a B.
Yeah, 10 billion.
Crazy.
Yeah,
but and so they're definitely buying. And I think there was a leak showing that like Zuckerberg had said, just basically buy every competition, just any competition, just buy it and kill it, just get rid of it. So that aside from that, for the buying these other studios for non-VR purposes, I don't completely understand what is the goal. Is it just to own the IP and keep it exclusive, or just to have a diversified portfolio, or what is the reason that Sony or Microsoft want specific studios and game titles?
Sometimes it can be, a lot of times, it's IP and all the rest of it. Sometimes it can be defensive. So if you see your competitor, this is just industry in general, if you see a competitor buying up lots of providers, suddenly you're like, I better get some myself so that they don't buy up the other ones. And you start looking at all the really top name brands that are making incredible moves or incredible games in this circumstance. And you'll sit there and go, right, okay, well, they're making incredible games. They're going to be an acquisition target. And it only takes one thing for that share price of that company to drop a little bit, and then suddenly they're a brilliant acquisition target for a big company. And that was probably under one of Microsoft's considerations. Activision Blizzard's shares were getting hurt by news stories that were coming out and losing a lot of employees. So they become an acquisition target, maybe a little bit more. Again, speculation, but Facebook-wise, they're looking at any game that has traction in VR and saying, we need to buy this for 2 reasons. One, they want those studios to keep building VR games. And if those VR games aren't as profitable because there aren't as many users playing them, I mean, they are profitable at the moment, but are they profitable in comparison to that studio building for a console, for a PC or something like that? they might switch tracks. They might do some VR and say, okay, great, that was good, but we're not making enough money on this. We're going to start building off another company. Does Oculus turn around and go, well, no, we need content because we've got to sell these headsets. We've got to be a dominant player in this. So they buy them to be able to fund them to build more content for them. But also, if they own all the game studios building virtual reality games, or all the big studios, suddenly every other virtual reality headset has problems with market influence. And you see some of that from things like HTC and HP hitting very strict enterprise plays with the latest headsets they've come out with. It might be a question, are they doing that because, Viveport, which was the sort of the Oculus Store version for HTC, that had real traction problems from the looks of it, and so now Vive is coming out with a lot of enterprise plays. Is that why they're doing it? And is Oculus just literally buying up left, right, and center to push these people over? Because even though VR is a much bigger thing than just games are predominantly the market share of the profits in VR at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, really? I was always wondering, like, if games are where the money is, like the bigger chunk of the money, or if it was in enterprise stuff, or if it's just that, is it because the games is so big that it ends up being a total more, but can you make more in enterprise VR development or game VR development, I guess?
It's a hard one to unpack. The thing is, you've got a decent consumer base now in VR to make money in VR, and there's plenty of studios that are making seven figures on releases now with their VR games. They're not making they're not making billions on these, like right. Grand Theft Auto 24 Hours, $1 billion in sales. That's not going to be a thing for a little while. But there's enough users out there playing video games on the headsets that are making purchases, and these purchases are of a similar price point without being as big as your AAA titles coming out on other platforms. So there's good traction there for games companies to come in and build stuff. The thing is, you don't see a lot of the EA and Activision producing tons of VR content still, and that's a site that maybe the industry is not quite matured to the full extent yet. But there's enough money in enterprise I have a business in VR enterprise. There's enough money rolling around in VR enterprise to live quite happily on.
I imagine the headsets themselves are a huge consideration, where with Oculus you've got $299 you can buy at Costco, whereas all the other headsets are much more expensive. I had heard Apple working on whatever they're going to come out with, it might be like $3,000. Obviously, consumers aren't going to spend $3,000 for a VR headset.
Apple consumers might.
True.
And like with HoloLens, HoloLens specifically targets enterprise now, right, in industry. But at the very beginning, it was it seemed at least kind of up in the air about what you had game demos and stuff.
Yeah, me and Jason have built a few game demos on the HoloLens. That's an interesting conversation in itself.
Amazing games, Dave. Amazing games.
Just stunning. Me and Jason went up and done a few hacks with the HoloLens, and I don't think Microsoft was too happy with it.
I really want to try something on the HoloLens too. I think that with just some chill time hanging out, like a weekend, could be fun. It could come up with like a fun, interesting, interactive game, where if it was, so somewhere comfortable and chill.
Give Andrew from Microsoft a shout and see if he gives us some headsets to play.
Yeah, get a hold of time. We could maybe do like have some fun.
Yeah, I mean, the enterprise level headsets are coming out at a lot more money. But enterprise companies are using Oculus an awful lot more. So I have customers that use both Oculus, that use the Index, and that use the Vive. None of the others at the moment. But the Oculus is just such a good package for enterprise. They want to ship headsets around to different people. They don't have to ship a computer with it. It's a really simple standalone product that they can just easily package, push out to their users and say, here it is. And Facebook Business wrapped a lot of that stuff up so you don't have to go through the standard interface or log in or do the other bits and pieces. Well, you don't have to log in now. It was a nightmare when you did have to use your Facebook account at your business to log into the headset. It was nonsense. Yeah. But yeah, it's a little bit of the Wild West at the moment still. And every time I do a conference, they come out with half of it's about the new headsets are coming out. And I recently was in a talk with some people that are planning a next conference. And I was like, let's not just sit there and talk about headsets for half of it again, because they're redundant the year later. I do try and tell people a lot of times the headset is just a tool. Like, stop trying to wow people with VR and wow them with the experience you're doing in VR. Like, headset's a tool to show your experience that you're going to give people. And until some of the industry realizes that, it's just some of it's a marketing play. Oh, look, you could do this in VR, and it's like, oh, who gives a crap? Is it a better experience that I can do straight on my PC right now?
Yeah, I guess the holy grail, or the trigger point for mass adoption, is going to have to be a combination of the user experience, but also the headset user experience. Just, it's easy, if any average person can just kind of look at it and be like, all right, let me give it a try. Oh, that's fun, that's cool. That's where it has to be for mass adoption. And if the businesses are preferring that too, then there's less and less market for the a $10,000 crazy high-end headset. If people are like, we can get by with the $500 one just fine.
And I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of these headsets that are coming out of Meta are lost leaders. They're losing a little bit on the headsets, like Microsoft and Sony does. Whenever they release a console, it's very rare that console is like making the money immediately. They're making it off the licensing with the games that they're putting out afterwards. Not so much the last generation, and Nintendo proved that with the Wii, that wasn't a loss leader when it came out, and they made a ton of money off the console as well as what was being put onto it. But I wouldn't be surprised with Meta's amount of money they can throw at this, that they could do a loss leader on some of this stuff. Because, you've got screens in these things that are expensive, and like sensors that are expensive, even off the shelf at bulk. The
latest and greatest technology. So it's, where Nintendo was underpowered compared to the rest. So they're like, well,
and it was a good play by Nintendo.
Yeah.
Yeah. They went, the experience doesn't have to just be the graphics. It can be what the fun is. And they pulled out the fun in the Wii, and they really worked towards it. But
Are you guys ready to see the semifinals of our giveaway? We're down to 4 people. We've got John, Payam, Angela, and Codebit, I think. It's a little small on my screen, but let's hit play or let it go and see who finishes off. We got 3 rats and a crab, and it looks like 2 DPS and 2 ninjas. I forgot we added ninjas. I don't remember what they do anymore.
Full screen it, Jason.
Oh, good point. Let's do that. We'll go big for the finals. All right. Giant-sized final battle. And then I got one other thing I wanted to share after this too.
So this is Angela.
Who wins?
Angela. 2 rats.
2 rats. Oh, they're 2 ninjas.
Someone said you gotta nerf the rats. So
you gotta nerf the ninjas.
Nerf the rat ninjas.
Because the races don't actually do anything but change the model. So, yeah, only the classes do right now. We'll fix that though. Maybe I think I need to just get some time, maybe do a live stream and make some mods to this thing.
This is going to be close.
Wait, there we go.
All right. Congratulations, John. Send me an email, jason@game.courses, and I'll send over your 1-year rider license, hopefully later on today if you're watching live. I assume you're still here. There was one other thing I wanted to share before I forget. I've forgotten to share this like 3 times already. Let me switch that view. Which was this little speaker page here, and I'm going to drop it in the chat as well. So still looking for a couple speakers for this upcoming conference this summer for Unity developers, and really looking for people who want to talk to their peers about Unity, primarily Unity specific stuff, but stuff that really applies to just every standard game dev. So something that's going to apply to the normal game dev doing their normal job, stuff that's actionable that they can actually bring in and start using right away, not stuff that is coming in the future or stuff that has been around forever, but more just want really actionable talks where people can come out of it and have something that they can do. A couple of the things that have been requested lately that I think would be great would be something on the new networking stack. So Unity's new networking stack that's been, I'm not sure the exact state of it right now, but I know that it's in development. I believe there's a couple releases out there, or maybe one release that's been out there. And also things like the addressable system. I think that a good talk on how to actually use and implement addressables for developers would be great. But also just anything on code, design, or art specific things that are good for Unity developers that aren't artists. Kind of like some of the things that Andrew was talking about, explaining blend shapes, how you can use those in your characters and morph them, or maybe how to do some modifications or making. So one of the things I thought Dave would be great at up there, I haven't told him yet, would be doing a talk on how to make a level look pretty. I don't know if that's possible, if you can explain how to make something look pretty, but every time Dave looks at, I give Dave a level or see Dave open something up, like half an hour later, it looks beautiful. So something like that for people who aren't artists, stuff like that. So if you've got some thoughts or topics like that, the link is here. It's in the description too. Just go submit the talk, and we'll be going through them this week. So yeah, hopefully you got something. Submit them up, and yeah, the speakers will get paid for speaking.
I've just reminded myself to actually put that in the calendar because I didn't know it in the calendar yet.
Oh yeah, there you go.
Yeah. I'll talk on something. We could do that. How to make something pretty, or Andrew can make something pretty. Andrew makes prettier stuff than I make.
I would love to see a talk on making stuff pretty, because I'm constantly, especially, it's embarrassing to say, I've been using Unity now for 10 years. Every time I have to do any light mapping or light probes and reflection probes, I'm like, I get lost so fast, and I'm like, why is this doing this? What's wrong? And yeah, so I would love to watch your talk and then make my stuff even prettier.
Maybe I'll just stream for 3 days on making a video game.
It's got to be condensed, tight, packed, actionable.
Nope, just me 3 days sitting there having an argument with Unity, building stuff and not helping people in any way, shape, or form. That's my teaching style. Literally, I just make stuff in front of people and they go, "How do you do that?" And then I tell them how to do that, but I don't interact.
Yeah, it does look like magic. I mean, I've seen it. Like Dave just like downloads this asset off the asset store, and he's like, "All right, I'm gonna make this look nice real quick, guys." Suddenly, it looks like something totally fucking different. I'm like, what the hell did you do to this asset? This was some weird low poly thing. Now it looks like an awesome game. Yeah, so I'd love to see something like that. And again, multiplayer networking with the new stack would be huge. I don't know. Maybe we'd just beg somebody from Unity to speak on it who's working on it. I don't know. It'd be really good.
Probably best, because it would probably change 3 times by the time it comes around.
It would definitely be a good one, because that's been hugely demanded. There are lots of things that people want to see, though. So if you got some thoughts, submit it, please. All right. Well, yeah, that was the main thing I wanted to remember to share, because I keep forgetting about that. So you guys got anything else you want to talk about this week, or do you want to just wrap things up a little early?
Hang on, I will get that video that just went down. I actually screwed up the scheduled date, so it actually got released an hour and a half ago, because that's what happens when you do it just before you go to sleep and you press a button and you think you pressed 11 o'clock and you end up pressing 10. So,
I thought it was next week, so yeah.
No, I've got one going.
I'm getting all kinds of mixed up. I'm way worse than that.
Oh, and you're muted now, Dave.
Oh no, his mic went off again.
Oh, his mic
disconnected. You're silent. So actually, you know what? I had a question in email. I forgot to reply about microphones, and the question was about why do most of us use these microphones, these big microphones that are sitting in front of us instead of like a little clip-on mic, or my optional one right here is, and let me switch to it real quick, and I'll show you why. The shotgun mic that's on top of the camera. So can you guys tell the difference instantly when I switch? And I mean, that's kind of why. It's mostly just because these Shure mics are SM7B and the other one, they sound very
Beautiful.
They have a very specific sound to them, and I just kind of like sticking with that and making it match. I think they sound better.
Mhm.
Not a whole.
Oh, now you're.
Oh, now you've lost your mic. I use an MV7 for mine, and it's now back on. Although I plug in far too much stuff, so my drivers mess up on a constant basis. Yeah, MV7 by Shure.
I have
I just switched the wrong one.
the Blue Yeti that I'm not using right now. Right now, it's just the laptop's microphone because this is plugged into my iMac here. I have the Blue Yeti, and I'm disappointed I didn't buy a Shure mic because everybody else has the Shures and they love it, and I bought this one, and it picks up way too much sound. No matter what setting I'm on, it picks up my stomach making a gurgle, which is super embarrassing when you're doing a live stream and or in meetings or something. It's way too I don't know what the term is, but it picks up way too much stuff, ambient sounds. So I need to change it, unfortunately.
Yeah, I had a Yeti and I moved to a Shure as well. Because
they're great at not picking up sound. I can go talk over there. You can't hear it. A dog can bark in front of me. You can't hear it. They're amazing. And I just, if you happen to look at them, I wanted to show you this. You can actually customize and pick like the colors of each part of them if you want. You can get the custom ones,
Cool.
or you get them all set up to match your stream. So that didn't exist when I got mine. Otherwise,
that didn't exist when I got mine either, and I'm dead jealous about that now.
Yeah, you can get all different colors on all the parts and stuff.
Is that on their website?
And it's like $30 more or something for not
I would definitely pay for that.
Yeah.
So I was saying just before that, I've put out a new video. I screwed up the timing. It was meant to go out at 11:30, and I put it out at 10 because I was doing it really late at night. And then I was doing a community poll, and I screwed up the wording in that. So everybody was like, "Are you putting out a video now? Or are you putting out a video later?" So this is Directing Unity. It's the video about pre-processing that we spoke about at the beginning. So that's a tutorial video and the end of season 1 for my tutorials. And I'm saying that because I haven't got any others lined up at the moment because I haven't recorded them. I've got a lot of content videos coming out. So, yeah.
Season finale.
Yeah, season finale. And it's directing pre-processors, which is a good topic to know. Very good topic to know, but not the most super interesting, gorgeous topic.
It's not a super flashy, fancy one, but it is like one of those things that if you know it when the problem occurs, you'll have the solution and not have a headache and freak out that there are a bunch of errors. Like you'll instantly know, like, oh, I just need this one little thing. I can go fix this problem, right? And it's same like when you see somebody else's package and you see me like, oh, I know what that is. I can fix this. This is easy. It's way simpler than it seems. So.
And I would have probably used some of the Lightning Sale deal assets, but I probably haven't in this one. So they're probably completely separate. I know there's some stinty ones in this one with some dancing characters and things. But
this page is not seeming to be loading for me, but I'm sure everybody can go check out the video. I'll link it down below too in the description, so everybody can go check that out. I'll go drop that in there. It's already in the chat, so if you want to go watch that, you could probably hop over there right now because I don't think I've got anything else left to say. Do you guys have anything else you wanted to share?
No, I've just got another hardware video coming out for this thing this week.
Oh, the little that's the RGB panel that you showed me, right? The
RGB panel that's been on a few times. There's how I built the prototype coming up, which has got all the scrappy code and all the things just to get it prototyping and running. So don't start writing back to me, oh, you didn't wrap this up. Yeah, I don't care. It's a prototype. That's what I do.
Right. Fix it afterwards once it's ready to go
then
out.
I make a proper one once I've worked out exactly what I want to do with it. So that's going to go up this week because people selected that in the poll and not for the hardware review, which will come out probably the week after.
Nice. I just turned on my RGB. So I actually hooked them up to my Stream Deck now. The RGBs are controlling Home Assistant, controlling WLED, which is controlled on that little. There's actually, you would probably be really disturbed if you saw it. There's an ESP32, I think, hanging right there from some wires down to the power supply.
And you wonder why you keep getting the magic smoke from all these chipsets. You're like,
I've got a pile of them. I literally have like a stack of just just I got more here, and I got more on the way because I'm not the best with keeping them right. I really need, I think, a 3D printer. I think that's the problem. I just don't have space for it.
Everybody
I need
needs a
3D
3D
printer.
printer.
Then I could print things out to put them in instead of just hanging stuff from wires to try to get the wires to not touch each other. But it's not as bad as I make it sound. I hope it's probably worse.
It's probably worse.
But yeah, I'd love to have you come through. Come check it out. I burned through 10 ESP. Yeah, yeah. I'm with you. burning through them quite a bit, and they come in 3-packs. So they're easy to mess up, but I'm getting better at it. I've ruined less things, and I'm pretty excited. I'm having a lot of fun with it, so I want to make a really big, nice display. Well, all right, guys. You guys got any last words? Otherwise, I think we'll just wrap it up and send everybody over to watch Dave's video. Jump into the Lightning sale. Make sure to go check that out and grab whatever assets. It's funny. I actually already have that better UI. I didn't realize it. I bought it in a bundle. Didn't notice it, so I need to actually go check it out. It just didn't show up as already in there. Yeah, so go check all that stuff out. Check out the conference and the links. Go to speak if you want to speak, and the courses and everything else down in the description below. And I guess we'll see you next week.
One last thing. Try and be the first people to buy all the stuff from Andrew on the asset store.
Oh, yes, because it is pretty limited. Yeah, you got to rush to get them, right?
Yeah, there's, I think, only 20 at the top tier. But I think if everyone clicks buy now at the same time, everyone gets it. But
got it.
But
as soon as it goes past within a couple seconds or whatever, the timer.
Yeah, the discount isn't as high as Black Friday. It's not 90% off.
70 is still nuts. 70 is like my point where I'm like, yeah, 70% off. I'm probably gonna grab it.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it probably won't sell out as fast as my guess, because 90 is crazy. 70 is still an amazing deal for something you want.
There's a lot of people. I expect it to go quick. I plan on jumping on them right away. Yeah. I'm going to be like refreshing the page when it pops up. And somebody posted in chat. It was 8 a.m. on the 8th was the opening. Okay. So
yeah. So when they say,
or maybe they're maybe they're posting that because it actually opens
at 7 a.m.
Playing mind game.
Yeah, I would tell everybody an hour later as well.
That'd be good stuff. Cool. All right, guys. I guess thanks again for everybody coming out. Please hit the thumbs up, subscribe, and share and all that stuff. If you don't mind, go drop the stream on somewhere after you're done watching it. Drop a comment if you got some ideas, or thoughts, or stuff you think we should maybe do next time. And we'll see you next week. So bye. I'm going to hit the outro button with the music. People get to hear it one more time.